Chapter 2158. The black-clothed man laughed so hard that his entire body was cramping. I never thought that I would discover such a strange thing as soon as I came here to take a look. These two idiots walked on the right path with great difficulty, and gave birth to nascent souls. But they thought that they were pregnant, and their nascent souls had turned into vile spawns. And they wanted to get rid of them. People who can be so stupid in this world are really rare. This old man has really broadened his horizons this time. This guy seemed to have lost his sense of measure due to his complacency. So much so that he had laughed out loud later on. Chu Yang and Tan Tan discovered it at the same time. So they shouted, "Who? Who is it?" The black-clothed man flashed and disappeared without a trace. He flew for thousands or tens of thousands of miles before he finally stopped. Then he clutched his stomach and started to laugh crazily again. He laughed so hard that tears and snot were flowing down his face. It had to be said that today's matter had extremely serious consequences. So much so that it had become the lifelong shame of Minister Chu Yang and Lord Demon Emperor. These two bad guys would then use this conversation to threaten the two of them. And this would often lead to a heaven-shaking battle. "Do you want to fight with me? If you don't fight me, I'll announce it to the world. Come. Do you want to fight or not? Could it be that you are pregnant again?" Chu Yang and Tan Tan would often bristle with anger after hearing these two sentences. And they would have no choice but to fight. The two of them walked back as light as a feather. Tan Tan had also finally accepted the explanation of, this is the result of a high-level cultivation. So he slowly felt relieved. However, this time they walked back. And it was different. The two of them flew back as light as a feather. They didn't need to use their swords to explore the way. It seemed that they already knew where the obstacles ahead were. And everything was going according to their wishes. "It seems that my cultivation has advanced a lot." Tan Tan was somewhat proud of himself. It seems that handsome people have some benefits. Chu Yang sighed. "My junior martial brother is still my junior martial brother. This person is still the same person no matter what kind of opportunity he has." In fact, it wasn't just a huge improvement in cultivation. The extent of his improvement this time was so great that even Chu Yang himself felt that it was somewhat unimaginable. It was a little too astonishing. Chu Yang estimated that he had most likely already reached the peak of the celestial being level. The so-called limit of the celestial being level, the door to the saint level, was just a step away. He could become a saint at any time. Even though Chu Yang often made leaps and bounds like this, he still felt a little unaccustomed to the progress this time. After all, no matter how much heaven and earth Yuan Qi was raised in the past, even leaping over 20 realms in one go, the amount of heaven and earth Yuan Qi required to raise half a realm was not as much as the amount required now. The amount of energy required to advance from the elementary level to the advanced level of celestial being was roughly equivalent to the sum of first-grade supreme martial artist to second-grade supreme martial artist, and 10 times more. And the amount of Yuan Qi required to advance from the first level to the higher level was several times more than the initial level. Under such circumstances, he had leaped from the peak of the beginner level of the celestial being realm to the peak of the celestial being realm, and could even reach the legendary sage realm at any time. This was a special situation that was close to becoming a Buddha on the spot. Peak of the celestial being realm. Chu Yang's eyes lit up. And although he had not really verified it at this moment, he vaguely felt that his peak of the celestial being realm was probably different from other people's peak of the celestial being realm. And it was not only because of the difference in the number of danshians, because this difference alone was not enough to prove his suspicions. Chu Yang felt that he was really full of confidence now. It was a kind of strong confidence that he would dare to face any enemy with his sword and be able to win. It was not conceit, not arrogance, but confidence. Genuine confidence, unparalleled confidence. This unprecedented confidence came from the fact that they were twins. Chu Yang even vaguely felt that as long as he wanted to use power, that little one would immediately provide him with inexhaustible power. This feeling was very subtle. Chu Yang did not know where it came from, but it was so real that he could not doubt it. "I am now one step away from the peak of the celestial being realm." Tan Tan felt that his strength had improved greatly. He was excited but also a little depressed. Why was he always one step weaker than Chu Yang? In order to help him, even the Demon King's soul was sacrificed. Why was he still one step weaker than Chu Yang? If someone else had heard these words from his heart, perhaps even Di Ho would have caught Tan Tan and swallowed him alive before speaking again. "You fucking improved from saint level to high level celestial being realm in an instant, and you are still not satisfied? And you still feel sad? Even this fucking Sei is not as sad as you." The two of them, one in front and one behind, floated back, a little dizzy. A big pie fell from the sky. I ate it, I swallowed it, I caught it. But I was also knocked out at the same time. I was really knocked out. The two of them had the same feeling. It was real. At this moment, Chu Lur had already drunk water 13 times. She was still spitting saliva everywhere as she talked about Chu Yang's legendary stories. Chu Lur had heard these stories countless times from Gu Duxing, Luo Kadi Gmo, Zi Sheqing and Rui Budong. Especially many stories in the upper three heavens, Chu Lur had personally participated in them. Based on her endless admiration for her big brother, Chu Lur had been racking her brains to find out everything about her big brother's past. This also added a lot of credibility to today's narration. Everyone, including Uncle Hu and Uncle Ma, listened attentively without any distractions. It was as if they were intoxicated and couldn't extricate themselves. They were completely drawn into Chu Yang's legendary story from head to toe. As an orphan, he grew up painstakingly. When he was in his 20s, his strength was weak. He entered the empire alone. In just a few days, he became a popular and powerful figure. With a wave of his butcher's knife, blood flowed like a river. In a month's time, the image of the bloody and mysterious king of Hell Chu was molded. He dug out all the spies one by one, toyed with all the enemies in the palm of his hand, strategized and easily became a saint. He entered Great Zhao alone, entered the heart of the enemy and stirred up the flames of war. After that, he was chased for 8,000 miles. Tens of thousands of people chased after one person. After surviving 100 deaths, he decided the outcome of the battle on the battlefield and made the biggest empire in the lower three heavens suffer under his hands. He entered the upper three heavens alone. In a short period of time, he battled with all the big clans in a battle of wits and strength. Along the way, he struggled between life and death. In the end, he turned the entire upper three heavens into the backyard of Chu Yang and his brothers. He entered the upper three heavens alone and shook the world with the title of a divine doctor. He disrupted the medicine banquet, resisted the law enforcement officers, battled the Dharma Supreme, befriended the Moon Breeze Pavilion, ascended to immortality with a sword, settled the chaos in the world of ice and snow with a sword, and walked proudly in the martial world, unrivaled in the world. It seemed that there wasn't a single one of Chu Yang's deeds that didn't involve him going through extremely dangerous situations. He was always walking on a tightrope. Even though it was narrated by Chu Lur, everyone felt that their chests were heavy and they felt a little breathless. It was really hard to imagine that there was actually someone who had gone through so many life and death situations all the way until now and still hadn't fallen. Uncle Hu and Uncle Ma sighed deeply in their hearts. The two of them recalled all the famous people that they had met and heard of. There was really no one who could be mentioned in the same breath as Chu Yang's experience. Compared to Chu Yang, they instantly felt that all the dangers that they had encountered previously and the so-called life and death battles were really not worth mentioning. Because Chu Yang had always spent his days in ambush from all sides. This kind of person, unless he is willing, otherwise he will definitely not fall. Uncle Hu let out a long sigh. Yao Ningning was extremely agitated when she heard that. Her face flushed red, and her admiration for Chu Yang instantly rose to a level that no one in the past or in the future could ever surpass. Boss is actually such an awesome existence. Every single one of the things mentioned here was an immortal legend even if they were picked out individually. With so many legends linked together, that was a legend, that was a myth, that was a miracle. And this legend was still going on. The most fortunate thing was that he was by this legend's side. What was even more fortunate was that he had become his brother. He didn't know how many incense sticks he had burned in his previous 3, 5, or 7 generations to be able to receive such a blessing. Thank the heavens, thank the earth, thank the gods and Buddhas, and thank Big Brother Tan the most. If not for him, I wouldn't have met Big Brother Chu. Chu Lur's saliva flew everywhere as she spoke for a long time. She had just reached the time when Chu Yang had gone up to the upper three heavens. Right at this moment, Uncle Hu and Uncle Ma's expressions suddenly turned cold and their hair stood on end. The reason was very simple. These two people with the highest cultivation levels felt at the same time that there were two huge waves of pressure coming towards them. If the owners of these two waves of pressure were enemies, then it would be too scary. There were two reasons why it was scary. Firstly, in such a special geographical environment, the fewer people there were on the opposing side, the easier it would be to control the battle situation. Previously, they were at an absolute disadvantage in terms of numbers and only needed to fight back with all their strength. Almost all they could see were enemies. But now, once the battle started, at least 30% of their attention had to be focused on their own people. If they were not careful, they might hit their own people. The previous disadvantage was only the environmental factor. Although it would greatly reduce their battle power, they might still have a chance of winning. But the second scary factor was hard to eliminate. Uncle Hu and Uncle Ma had only slightly sensed this faint aura, but they immediately knew that the two of them were definitely not a match for these two people. Their hearts beat like drums at the same time. When did the enemy have two peerless experts of this level? They looked at each other and felt that their palms were already full of sweat. Chapter 2159. The rest of the people were all top-notch experts. Soon after, everyone fell into a frenzy. Sensing that something was wrong, Chu-Lu stopped talking. Everyone's eyes looked towards the southeast. Although they couldn't see anything, the strong pressure that seemed like the sky was about to collapse was clearly discernible. Everyone stood up at the same time, waiting for the battle to begin. At this moment, a very annoying voice said, "I remember that it's here. Why is there no sound at all? Have they all been abducted by that idiot Yao Ningning?" Another voice said, "You idiot, what are you blindly thinking about? They're clearly all in front. What nonsense are you talking about? Although Yao Ningning is indeed an idiot, you can't say that in front of him. How hurtful would that be? What a waste of that little guy calling you big brother. Aren't you ashamed?" The first voice then laughed embarrassedly. Yes, I can't say that in front of him." Yao Ningning's face was full of black lines. He was even more aggrieved in his heart. He questioned loudly, "How am I an idiot? When am I an idiot? Don't slander me like this." The two people opposite him laughed together. "How are you an idiot? Since when are you an idiot? Everyone knows that you're an idiot. Do you think that you're an idiot just because you don't admit it? Justice is in everyone's heart." Everyone burst into an uproar. To be able to make such a sound and say such things, there was no one else but Chu Yang and Tan Tan. It was actually the two of them who came. The two sources of unprecedented pressure were actually these two. Wasn't this too fantastical? Manor Lord, you're back? Even Bai Yuchen felt that there was a little excitement in his voice. Chu Luer's brainwashing just now was obviously very successful. Although she had only told them about Chu Yang's great achievements, which were absolutely not made up, it had already made this group of people, who were originally full of admiration for Chu Yang, worship him to the point of being brain-dead. Chu Yang's position in their hearts was already infinitely close to that of a god. It was already faith. It was worship. Among these people, Yao Ningning was even included. The current Yao Ningning was undoubtedly Chu Yang's die-hard fan. At this moment, he was laughing foolishly and muttering to himself, "Did Boss Chu say that just now? Boss Chu's words can't be wrong. Since Boss Chu said that I'm a bit stupid, then it seems that I really am a bit stupid." Uncle Hu and Uncle Ma were speechless as tears streamed down their cheeks. In the past, if anyone had dared to say such a thing about him, their entire family would have been executed. But now he admitted it himself, even though that sentence was the truth. Everyone couldn't see the obvious changes in Chu Yang and Tan Tan. However, they could clearly feel it. So, everyone kept silent without prior consultation. "Don't ask." "How are everyone's injuries now?" Chu Yang asked. "Everyone's wounds have been properly bandaged. We are ready to fight at any time," Che Shuchu replied with his chest puffed out. In the past, everyone would have mechanically answered the same question. But now that Chu Yang had asked it, everyone felt inexplicably moved in their hearts. It was an indescribable encouragement. It seemed as if this sentence was very ordinary, but when it came out of Chu Yang's mouth, it became very unusual. This subtle change made Chu Yang's heart skip a beat. However, he didn't say it out loud. He just smiled and said, "Since everyone has almost recovered, then we have to continue on our journey. If I'm not wrong, our enemies are probably waiting for us at the exit of the canyon." He smiled gently and said, "We can't let them wait too long. If they leave, where will we go to look for them? They want to get rid of us, but we also want to get rid of them." Everyone roared with laughter. One after another they said, "Yes, if they leave, even if we want to, where will we have the time to look for them?" Chu Yang's words revealed a strong self-confidence and monstrous killing intent. Everyone's spirit immediately rose 100 times. Even Saint Hu and Saint Ma felt their blood boiling from the bottom of their hearts. "Let's go. Let's go and kill them." Tan Tan waved his hand and led the way in high spirits. Everyone rushed forward. They once again walked in that boundless land of darkness. However, they didn't have the same uneasiness as before. Even their trembling mentality seemed to have disappeared. Chu Yang and Tan Tan walked in the front. They were like two lofty mountains that stood tall and lofty. They withstood all the wind and rain and shouldered all the dangers. Everyone's heart was full of relaxation. They were like mountains. The last part of the journey was very peaceful. It was unprecedentedly peaceful. It was so peaceful that everyone couldn't believe it. Along the way, everyone could clearly feel that there were traces of the enemy's ambush in some of the dark corners. But now all of the enemies were gone. Chu Yang proudly walked forward. His clothes fluttered all the way. He was obviously walking in the endless darkness, but it seemed as if he was taking a leisurely stroll. His speed was astonishingly fast. Tan Tan walked side by side with him from beginning to end. They weren't in front, but they weren't behind either. These two martial brothers didn't speak in the endless darkness. But they had the same feeling. I'm stepping on this land. A long-lost light faintly appeared in front of them after an hour. Bai Yu Qin and the others were experienced people. So they closed their eyes. Their eyes would be damaged if they suddenly came in contact with light in this boundless land of darkness. So they wouldn't be able to react for a moment. So, closing their eyes for a moment was the best choice in this situation. However, Chu Yang and Tan Tan didn't choose to close their eyes. Instead, the two of them calmly walked out. They faced that ray of light. A somber and desolate aura came from outside. There was a large army stationed in front of them. Obviously it was Mo Yunqian's soldiers. Chu Yang's eyes were cold. He smiled and said softly, "We were chased by you for so long. Today we can finally get some interest back." Tan Tan didn't say anything. Instead he laughed heartily. They didn't know if there were thousands or tens of thousands of soldiers lying in ambush outside. However, these two martial brothers didn't even check the enemy's situation. They were ready to fight. They took a step out of the canyon. The dawn arrived. The front was bright and clear. If they took a step back it would be dark. If they took a step forward, it would be clear sky for thousands of miles. The wonders of this place could be seen. The sun was setting in the west and it was already afternoon. Although the sun was setting in the west, it still shone brightly. The autumn wind was bleak, bringing with it a hint of warmth. The autumn wind whistled and swept across the sky. Countless drifting yellow leaves spun around and covered the ground. This place was an empty land. 1,000 feet away, it was Mo Yunqian's army. The other party's head was black. There were at least 10,000 people. The person at the front had his hands behind his back. He was standing proudly. However, his face was full of worry. His brows were tightly knitted. It was Meng Wuya. Behind him was his personal deputy. In front of the large army, there was one person standing in front of each army. They were the 10 generals under Yu Qi. There were a total of 13,000 people here. They were waiting for Chu Yang and the others to come. The black fog in front of them was dense. It was as if a demon had opened its big mouth. After everyone came out of this place of eternal darkness, they didn't want to go back in again. At this moment, the black fog seemed to have become denser for some reason. Then two people walked out of it leisurely. It looked like they were on an outing and their bodies were full of ease and ease. Seeing so many soldiers on the other side, the two of them were actually able to maintain their composure. They slowly walked over with unusual calmness. Behind the two people, one figure after another appeared from the darkness. In this kind of broad daylight they were like a team of demons. They appeared from the boundless darkness. Meng Wuya's pupils contracted. He counted carefully one by one. 10, 20, 28. Apart from Chu Yang and Tan Tan who walked out first, the two little girls, the Demon Clan's Grand Master and his two bodyguards, there were still 28 people left. The corner of Meng Wuya's mouth could not help but twitch. In this Yama Gorge, such a sophisticated ambush, no less than 10,000 people were used to set up the ambush. With such great fanfare, with such a big fuss, only a few people were killed? Meng Wuya clearly remembered that when these people stepped into the Mist River, there were no more than 30 people. After that, a few more died and now there were 28 people left. In other words, there were no more than 5 people who died in Yama Gorge? This kind of inference made Meng Wuya's heart twitch. Meng Wuya was not unfamiliar with the person in front. It was Chu Yang. With a wave of Chu Yang's hand, the people behind him, including Yao Tai, all stopped in their tracks and quickly stood in a row. Then, the two young men in the front still maintained a calm and leisurely manner as they walked forward. Meng Wuya stared at Chu Yang cautiously. He could clearly feel that the current Chu Yang was very different from the previous Chu Yang. This kind of thought made him instantly increase his vigilance. The other Mo Yuntian soldiers looked at the two people who walked forward step by step. Under the setting sun, their shadows were elongated. At this moment they actually had a feeling, if these two people walked into our troop like this, would the shadows behind them cover all of us? Chapter 2160. Meng Wuya said indifferently, Chu Yang, your luck is really good. You were able to escape all the way until now. But today, at this moment, I advise you to surrender without putting up a fight. Chu Yang smiled faintly. He raised his head slightly. Tan Tan was standing behind him at this moment. He could clearly feel that his senior brother's body was slowly condensing a murderous aura that was about to take shape. The setting sun shone on Chu Yang's face. It actually gave birth to a kind of mottled and blurred feeling out of nowhere. It made some parts of his face bright and some parts dark. General Meng, to be honest, I admire you for being a good man. You can clearly distinguish between right and wrong. You have your own principles and do not go against your heart. Chu Yang raised his face and said to himself, just based on my heart, I really don't want to be your enemy. When we make our move later, I will try my best to keep you alive. In return for your kindness in protecting my sister at the lone bamboo city gate. Good people always have good karma, isn't it? Chu Yang took in a deep breath. His gaze gradually shifted downwards. Looking at the Mo Yuntian army that was as vast as the sea of smoke, it was as if he was looking at a bunch of clay chickens and pottery dogs. His gaze was filled with disdain, but, all these people shall stay here. The feng shui here is not bad. Maybe it can benefit the future generations. Tan Tan laughed strangely. Senior brother's words are right. The feng shui here is really good. I can see that. Not to mention other things, the place is spacious enough. There is more than enough space to bury these people. Isn't it because their ancestral graves are emitting green smoke that it can benefit the future generations? Even if Meng Wuya had good self-restraint, he couldn't help but get angry at this moment. He shouted, Chu Yang, you should have heard of this saying, don't be arrogant. Jianghu doesn't recognize arrogance. Do you think that under such circumstances, you still have any chance to get lucky? Chu Yang shook his head and laughed. He stood up straight and said, back then Mo Yuntian snatched my wife. Everyone saw that I was powerless. Not only did Mo Yuntian not admit his wrongs, he became angry out of humiliation and became even worse. Mo Yuntian, a heavenly emperor, Yuan Tianji, confused right and wrong, inverted black and white, and brazenly sent out troops for his own selfish desires for revenge. Ignores justice, ignores morality, and acts willfully. I fought back with all my might, and I fled 137,800 li. The ink cloud heavenly army does not differentiate between right and wrong, does not care about reason, and pursues for thousands of miles, oppresses the good, oppresses women and children, and treats human lives like grass. From top to bottom, they are all thieves and corrupt officials. Today, I believe that there is no need for Mo Yuntian's official forces to exist anymore. In my lifetime, I will exterminate all of Mo Yuntian's official forces to uphold justice and justice in the world. Chu Yang's gaze turned cold as he shouted, if there's no justice in heaven, then I will enforce justice on behalf of heaven. His words were filled with righteousness, grief, and grievance. Beside him, Tan Tan sighed in amazement. Senior Marshal brother, you've finally understood. Anyone who placed themselves on the moral high ground in advance and placed themselves on the side that was being bullied, no matter whether it was speaking or doing things, they were indeed righteous and bold. Meng Wuya's eyes stared deeply at Chu Yang. He only felt that his heart was in a trance and he was speechless for a long time. The person who knew the most about the whole story of Chu Yang's pursuit was none other than Meng Wuya. In the journey of 137,800 li of death, Chu Yang was powerless to fight back at the beginning, and only fled. Later on he fought and fled. Later on he took the initiative to attack and stir up trouble. Later on he lived in seclusion in Lone Bamboo City. Now, facing thousands of soldiers and horses, he no longer had any fear. In fact, for the first time in his life he said such bold words, in my lifetime I will exterminate all of Mo Yuntian's official forces. These words made Meng Wuya's heart tremble. Except for Meng Wuya, all of Mo Yuntian's soldiers thought that Chu Yang's words were just a last-ditch struggle before death. However, Meng Wuya clearly knew that Chu Yang was not a person who spoke empty words. He never said things that he couldn't do and he disdained to say them. Since he said it now, he must have considerable confidence in being able to do it. But now, Chu Yang, whose forces were still weak, actually said such words like exterminating Mo Yuntian. At this moment, Meng Wuya was even in a trance. It was as if he saw the whole of Mo Yuntian with smoke everywhere and corpses piling up like mountains. In a trance, he actually forgot to reply for a moment. Behind him, a general flew into a rage. What an arrogant and ignorant junior. Seeing that my heavenly soldiers have arrived, he immediately flew into a rage. Why don't you surrender and kowtow and beg for mercy? You actually dare to talk nonsense here and bewitch people's hearts. Man, take down that insolent person for me. With a whoosh, behind him 100-man team led by a small captain took the lead and rushed out. The voice of this general sounded loudly. General Meng, since you are so afraid of this Chu Yang, please step down. This time, let's see my Iron Guards succeed. Actually, there's nothing much to say. General Meng is after all a general of a defeated army under Chu Yang's hands. Not everyone has the courage to continue fighting despite repeated defeats. Don't embarrass me, Mo Yuntian. Between his words, he did not hide his sarcasm towards Meng Wuya. The general behind Meng Wuya showed anger on his face and was about to explode. But Meng Wuya sighed deeply and waved his hand to stop his men. He said indifferently, if that's the case, then it's up to General Qin. We will wait and see. General, just do your best. With a wave of his hand, all the Dream Slayer army members floated away like a cloud, revealing a large open space. Obviously, Meng Wuya was determined to watch coldly from the sidelines this time. All along, Meng Wuya had some psychological barriers towards the matter of besieging Chu Yang. Because the root cause of this matter was all Mo Yuntian's fault. Now, since he was not allowed to take action, it was exactly what he wanted. The 100-man Iron Guards fiercely rushed towards Chu Yang and Tan Tan. Chu Yang was still smiling. He was as calm as ever. With his hands behind his back, he did not move at all. Tan Tan issued a loud and insolent laughter. He jumped out from Chu Yang's side and stood in front of Chu Yang. Then he opened his hands in order to prevent Chu Yang from attacking. He then shouted, "These are mine. Don't snatch them." Then he couldn't wait to pounce forward. While in midair he roared, "What? You guys actually have the luck to die in the hands of such a handsome man like me. Your ancestors' graves are really emitting green smoke, ah?" At the end of his words he suddenly shouted violently. This shout was like an earth-shattering thunderclap that suddenly resounded between heaven and earth. It directly exploded above the heads of these 100-man people. These 100-man people were all stunned without exception. Some of them even lost their footing and staggered. Tan Tan had already flown and landed in the middle of this 100-man team. He was like a bomb exploding. He shouted, "Howl, howl, howl." Suddenly he lowered his waist and sat in a horse stance. His two hands spread outwards. His whole body instantly emitted extremely dense black energy. He shouted, "Open." Boom. Thousands of black energy suddenly shot out from his body in all directions like sharp swords. It was an indiscriminate wide-range attack. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Puff, puff, puff. The 100-man team had been fiercely rushing forward a moment ago. But they were suddenly attacked by thousands of black energy. It was as if thousands of arrows had been shot at the same time. Everyone had been shot into hedgehogs made of black energy. The black energy didn't dissipate after it had pierced through a person's body. It also didn't pass through the body. Instead, it condensed and remained motionless. The screams and howls of pain seemed to be continuous for a moment. Tan Tan jumped up. He made a circle with his right hand and said, "Come back." Thousands of black energy suddenly came out from the bodies of the enemies under this command. It seemed as if they had a life of their own. Then they returned to Tan Tan's hand. More than 100 people slowly fell down without exception. Dozens of arrows of blood suddenly spurted out from each of their bodies. It seemed that none of them would be able to survive. Everyone didn't have enough time to be surprised when Tan Tan's side made a move. He took the lead and rushed 30 feet in front of General Qin. Then he suddenly stopped. He changed from a swift and violent forward charge to a leisurely stroll. He clasped his hands behind his back, and leisurely paced 3 or 4 steps in front of General Qin. He then asked in a carefree manner. It seemed as if this trivial matter wasn't worth mentioning. "Hey, am I handsome or not?" General Qin was dumbstruck. He looked in front of him in disbelief. His 100-man team had slowly fallen down. Their bodies were shrinking at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. They fell down one by one with a plop sound and turned into corpses. How could he respond to Tan Tan's "Am I handsome or not?" under such a great change? He felt as if all the blood in his body had rushed to the top of his head. He glared at Tan Tan in a split second. It seemed as if he wanted to eat him alive. "Ugly bastard, you're so ruthless. You're so vicious." Tan Tan flew into a rage. He couldn't maintain his carefree demeanor anymore. He was flustered and exasperated as he cursed, "Fuck you. I asked you a question with such a good attitude. Are you fucking deaf? I asked you, am I handsome or not? Don't fucking stare at me and don't speak. You fucking aren't mute. I heard you speak a moment ago." General Qin almost fainted from anger when he heard this. This ugly bastard is clearly someone who would make me want to vomit if I look at him. And I would get nightmares if I look at him twice. But he has killed my 100-man team without any mercy. And he still has the nerve to ask me this question in front of me, am I handsome or not? What kind of person is this? Does he have any sense of shame? You're fucking handsome. General Qin's nose became crooked from anger. He roared like thunder, you rotten bastard. You're a heavenly damned scoundrel. You don't have the face to ask me if I'm handsome or not. Do you have any sense of shame? He then roared again after he was done speaking, you're a heaven-struck executioner. This old man is going to swallow you alive. Tan Tan's nose became crooked from anger when he heard this. Chapter 2162. Tan Tan roared loudly. His eyes seemed as if they were about to split open. What did you say? Who are you calling ugly? General Qin was seething with anger. I said that you're a rotten melon and cracked date. Even a rotten melon and cracked date that isn't rotten is better looking than you. Tan Tan's voice changed. You're talking nonsense. You're distorting black and white. You're confusing right and wrong. You're pointing at a deer as a horse. You're talking nonsense. Suddenly he jumped up. He was extremely furious. In fact, it seemed as if his heart was on fire. General Qin sneered, you're courting death. He pulled out his sword. At the same time he was also burning with rage. Ugly bastard. Son of a bitch. I won't be a man if I don't kill you today. I swear that I won't be a man if I don't kill you. Tan Tan was extremely angry. You're a bastard who distorts the truth. You dare to call me ugly? He steeled his heart and rushed towards the sword. He didn't dodge or evade. Instead, he stretched out his hand and grabbed the blade of his opponent's sword. General Qin wasn't alarmed. Instead he was delighted. He was experienced in battle. He wanted to twist the blade of his sword and cut this audacious guy's hand into dumplings. However, he was horrified to find that his opponent's hand hadn't touched his sword yet. But his sword had already turned into a fried dough twist. Tan Tan's angry face enlarged infinitely in front of him the next moment. Tan Tan's white teeth were almost close to his eyes. General Qin couldn't help but scream in fear. And the next moment, slap. General Qin's face had been violently slapped several hundred times by Tan Tan in the blink of an eye. Then Tan Tan swung his entire body with one hand and crazily threw him to the ground. Bang. You called me ugly bastard. You called me ugly bastard. I asked you if you were handsome or not. But you call me ugly. You distorted the truth. You lied with your eyes wide open. Again and again Tan Tan threw this pitiful General Qin's body onto the ground like a sandbag. After he was thrown down once he would swing him up again and then throw him down again and again. Bang. Bang. This pitiful General Qin had already been thrown down by Tan Tan 100 or 200 times in the blink of an eye. Those soldiers who had rushed over to rescue General Qin were lifted up by Tan Tan. Then Tan Tan repeatedly used total annihilation of 1,000 armies. One by one they were smashed to the point where their heads were bleeding. At first they did not come forward. They thought that with General Qin's abilities, it would be easy for him to deal with this ugly ghost. Who would have thought that General Qin, who they thought was invincible, would be swung around like a rag or a sack in front of this ugly ghost before he could even get close to her? By the time they arrived, everything would have been settled. Speaking of which, this General Qin was also a first-rate expert and had the cultivation of the heaven level. In the Mo Yuntian army in front of him, even if he couldn't be considered as outstanding, he could at least be considered as one of the top 20. However, he was like a 3-year-old child in front of Tan Tan, whose cultivation had skyrocketed. Moreover, he was absolutely invincible at the same cultivation level as him. Bang. Bang. General Qin's body was smashed to the ground almost continuously under Tan Tan's extremely fast swings. Traces of cracks had already appeared on the hard ground. It was a hideous sight. Finally, after a few hundred smashes, General Qin's head could not hold on any longer. Suddenly, it left his neck and rolled out of the room. His head was separated from his body. He was dead. A heaven-level expert had been smashed to death by Tan Tan in such an extreme and unreasonable way. He had relied on the strength of his body to smash him to death. Thousands of soldiers who were about to rush over to rescue General Qin suddenly stopped in their tracks. They looked at Tan Tan as if they were looking at a devil. Tan Tan's ferocious eyes swept across the faces of thousands of people. The evil aura lingering around his body had not dissipated. He looked straight at them. Many people immediately shivered. Am I handsome? Tell me, am I handsome? Tan Tan casually grabbed another enemy soldier and asked with a fiendish look. You're handsome, my ass. This squad leader scolded loudly. Motherfucker. You still dare to echo the crowd? You don't know what you're talking about. Tan Tan punched this squad leader into the sky. That person's body was still in midair when it suddenly split into pieces. Tan Tan then grabbed another one. Am I handsome? He grabbed another one. Am I handsome? Am I handsome? Bah, bah, bah. Dozens of people were thrown into midair by Tan Tan. Their dantian had been sealed the moment they were thrown. When they fell, even if their bodies were still intact, they would be smashed into meat patties because of the free fall. Bright pools of blood blossomed on the ground. No one was lucky enough to escape. Everyone, let's get rid of this crazy, ugly bastard. It was unknown who took the lead to shout. Then more than 1,000 people under General Qin's command rushed forward with a rumbling sound. Chu Yang saw this and was about to help when he heard Tan Tan's shout, "No one over there is allowed to come over. I must fucking ask today and see if there's anyone in this group who can't lie with their eyes wide open. I don't believe that these people can collectively go against their conscience and not tell the truth in front of the handsome and elegant me." As he said this, he rushed towards the thousands of people alone. With a loud shout, thousands of demon energy surged out like a tide of spears and sharp swords. The corner of Chu Yang's mouth twitched. "My silly brother, I am afraid that you will be disappointed. When will you change this bad habit of yours?" In addition, General Qin and Meng Wuya's army still remained motionless. They looked at more than 1,000 people ganging up on one person. Their faces were indifferent and expressionless. In fact, no one even uttered a cry of alarm. Yu Qi's army had always been like this. Unless there was an order from the commander, they would attack together. General Qin's headquarters had already accepted his order. Since this was the case, it had nothing to do with the other troops. Unless all the people in this troop died, no other troop would intervene in this battle. One person against 1,000 soldiers. But the tragic momentum of this battle seemed like two elite troops fighting with their lives on the line. Shouts and screams reverberated like thunder. Screams rose and fell one after another. In addition, there was a loud and clear voice constantly shouting, "Am I handsome? Am I handsome? Am I handsome? Can you fucking speak the truth? You bastards are lying with your eyes wide open. All of you deserve to die. Go to hell." Tan Tan's voice was filled with grief and indignation. Chu Yang sighed in his heart. Chu Yang had been worried about his brother ever since he had come to know about the Devil King's special existence. So, he had naturally done a lot of research on the Devil King and Tan Tan in case of emergencies. Chu Yang had long suspected that Tan Tan would ask everyone he met if he was handsome or not. And Tan Tan would be unhappy if others said that he wasn't handsome. In fact, Tan Tan would force others to say how handsome he was. This wasn't a kind of hobby. And it wasn't because he wasn't handsome at all. Instead, it was because Tan Tan subconsciously knew that he was very handsome. So much so that Tan Tan's heart and soul believed that his essence was extremely outstanding and handsome. This was the affirmation and recognition of his heart. So, it wouldn't be swayed by any external force. And it would lead to such a special result. Moreover, Tan Tan had received two souls in one body. So, Chu Yang suspected that the Devil King was outrageously handsome. And the Devil King was equivalent to Tan Tan. Tan Tan felt that there was no difference between his appearance and the Devil King's. In fact, they were exactly the same. And they were exactly the same as each other. So, the unexpected disappearance of the Devil King's soul had undoubtedly dealt a huge blow to Tan Tan. He was fighting like a madman. Moreover, he was constantly asking that question. It seemed that he was extremely narcissistic. And it was extremely funny. However, he was actually filled with an indescribable bitterness. Tan Tan's murderous nature was unprecedentedly big in this battle. In fact, it was somewhat unpleasant. Perhaps Tan Tan was using this battle to bid farewell to the Devil King. He was using this distant road of blood to send off the Devil King who had already been annihilated. Chu Yang's guess was undoubtedly very close to the truth. He was the person who understood Tan Tan the most. So his guess was the closest to the truth. Tan Tan looked up to the sky and shouted without any warning on the battlefield. The clothes on his body suddenly bulged up. And the long hair on his head exploded with a bang. Then the flamboyant long hair fluttered in the air. Countless black devil energies suddenly flooded the entire battlefield. That was the Devil King's battle technique. Chu Yang's heart suddenly shook. He recalled the few battles where the Devil King's soul had fought. And it had been like this every time. And it had always been based on this sign. 1,000 devils descend. Tan Tan looked up to the sky and roared. Then his body started to spin at an extremely fast speed. Suddenly a whistling wind arose. and the shadows of people started to fly while he was spinning. In fact, they were densely packed with Tan-Tan's shadows in the blink of an eye. None of these shadows were virtual shadows. In fact, they were mixed with dense black energy. And they attacked together. Countless enemies screamed as they were sent flying with a bang sound. Who can't be killed in this world under the eyes of the devil? Kill 100 people with a single step. Vanquish all illusions with a single sword. Tan-Tan roared wildly. The sword in his hand soared into the sky. And the sword energy soared into the sky. Then dozens of enemies in front of him were pierced through like candied haws. Bang, bang, bang. His left hand was like a mountain-splitting axe. It ruthlessly whipped the bodies of the enemies. Their swords, sabers, and all other weapons were used. However, he didn't evade them in the slightest. The enemies were sent flying along with their weapons one after another. Then they were turned into fine powder along with their weapons. Chaotic world of demons? Tan-Tan roared wildly. Countless black energies once again shot out like spirit snakes. And they killed all the enemies within a radius of several hundred feet around him. Then he issued another loud roar. Then he rushed into the 10,000-man army without any hesitation. Venerable Devil King returns to heaven. Tens of thousands of souls will be buried with him. Devil's soul lives forever in the heavens and the earth. Countless devil energies suddenly emerged and swept across the entire battlefield. Chapter 2163. His voice was like a huge wave breaking through the entire sky in an instant. It reverberated in the sky for a long time, lingering in the air. Let's go. Everyone, let's kill this demon as soon as possible. Tan-Tan's last move was to rush into the heart of the enemy's army. This arrogant move undoubtedly aroused the intense anger of everyone. You're outnumbered. We have more than 10,000 people here. How dare you rush into the heart of the enemy's army? Not to mention that you're not a saint-level expert. Even if you are, you can't be so arrogant. The great general gave the order at the same time. Countless soldiers and horses besieged Tan-Tan. Everyone's hearts were as one. At this moment, there was another long and elegant shout. A voice that was completely otherworldly said, "A single ray of cold light pierces 10,000 fathoms. What harm is there in slaughtering the world? A sharp will buried deep does not change. Gather the wind and clouds to become the emperor." Meng Wuxia, who was watching the battle, closed his eyes in pain. He said softly, "Chu Yang." He finally made a move. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Chu Yang walked out confidently like a flying cloud. His figure was full of confidence and ease, but it was mixed with an astonishing speed that far surpassed the speed of flowing light. Together with his sword, he was like a long rainbow that startled the heavens. Just like that, he elegantly landed in the midst of the densely packed enemy ranks. As the long sword trembled rapidly, the Calamity sword let out a soft whistle. The dots of cold light were like brilliant stars in the sky. Moreover, each sword fell accurately on the vital points of each enemy's throat. It didn't stop at all, because there was no need to make a second attack. The bodies of all the enemies that were killed by his long sword swayed. Thin arrows of blood spurted out of their throats. However, the thin arrows of blood had already exhausted all the strength in their bodies. The only thing they could do was to use their hands to cover their throats. Their throats were hoarse, their eyes were bulging, and they slowly fell to the ground. The Calamity spirit hovered above Chu Yang with a sinister ghost smile. He opened the Taoya's mouth again and swallowed all the souls and death energy of the dead at the first moment. Chu Yang moved forward slowly, step by step. The Calamity sword was by his side, forming a bright protective light ball. Sometimes it shone brightly, sometimes it was a long dragon. Sometimes it shone with heaven-shaking divine light, and sometimes it was glorious and mighty. Wherever Chu Yang went, the enemies behind him would fall down in droves. Mo Yunqian's elite soldiers were like clay chickens and pottery dogs in front of Chu Yang at this moment. They were slaughtered as they wished. Not a single one of them was a match for him. This time, not a single person was injured. Everyone who was touched by the sword light died without exception. A blade across the sky for 10,000 autumns, this road leads to the netherworld. Chu Yang's eyes were filled with coldness as he waved the Calamity sword technique to his heart's content. He killed 100 people with a single step, moving unhindered without leaving a single trace. It was as if he was entering an unstoppable realm amidst a magnificent army. Behind them, Bai Yu Chen and the others let out a loud roar in unison. They followed closely behind Chu Yang and Bai Yu Chen. They didn't show the slightest bit of fear as they rushed into the army that was hundreds of times larger than their own. Everyone's blood was boiling as they dared to die. Chu Yang and Tan Tan were able to kill the enemy's army of thousands with just the two of them. Could it be that they were just going to watch like this? Chu Lure's white clothes fluttered in the wind. Her fairy-like appearance was graceful as she rushed into the enemy's ranks. Wherever she waved her white hands, the enemies fell down silently. They didn't make any more noise. Bai Shixian followed closely behind Chu Lure, launching sneak attacks from time to time. She naturally knew that although this little girl didn't get along with her master, Mo Qingwu, she was Chu Yang's younger sister. Mo Qingwu often fought with the two of them, but when it came to a critical moment, she still wouldn't hesitate to die for the other. At this moment, her safety was undoubtedly the most important. Behind them, Yao Ningning also wanted to rush forward. He wanted to show the heroism of the Jianghu, but he was firmly held back by the two old men. This was completely different from when they were in Lone Bamboo City. What a joke. It was naturally not a big deal if Chu Yang and the others went forward to fight. However, if Yao Ningning rushed forward at this critical juncture with his identity and position, it would immediately cause a huge commotion between the two worlds, and easily cause a world-shaking battle between the two worlds to erupt. Tan Tan was rushing forward like a madman. He roared endlessly, 10,000 creatures as a sacrifice, 10,000 creatures as a memorial. When the king returns, how can there not be 10,000 creatures accompanying him? Kill, kill, kill. At this moment, the entire battle was already in disorder. The two of them were like lions and tigers as they rushed into a flock of sheep. It was no longer Mo Yuntian's soldiers surrounding Chu Yang and the others. Instead, it was Chu Yang joining hands with Tan Tan to kill Mo Yuntian's soldiers. Meng Wuya finally closed his eyes and muttered, "Chu Yang's cultivation has already reached an unimaginable level. I'm powerless to do anything about it, these 15,000 troops. I'm afraid." Meng Wuya's eyes were wide open as he looked at Chu Yang. "General, should we go forward and help?" A deputy general beside him asked worriedly, "If things continue to develop like this, if we don't help, those 10 generals and their subordinates will not be able to escape from Chu Yang and the vicious hands of one of them." Meng Wuya said indifferently, "The situation is stronger than the person. What is the meaning of the strong taking the lead? Even if we help, will they be able to escape from Chu Yang's vicious hands? And, if we take the lead, I'm afraid we will all be buried here. The current Chu Yang is already not an opponent that we can fight against." Meng Wuya's voice was somewhat bitter. "Let's see what Marshal Yu chooses. If we go forward now, we will just be sending ourselves to death. Chu Yang's strength has advanced so quickly. He has already become a thorn in the side of our Mo Yuntian. I'm afraid he will become a great enemy that will shake the foundation of our Mo Yuntian." From an ant that he could easily squash to death at the beginning, under his pursuit, he had grown into a powerful figure who could easily squash him to death at the same time. All of this was happening with his own eyes. Only God knew what Meng Wuya and the Dream Slayer Army's generals were feeling at this moment. The affairs of the world were indeed unpredictable. The affairs of the world were indeed unpredictable. Meng Wuya suddenly remembered Chu Yang's words just now. "I, Chu Yang, will destroy all the official forces of Mo Yuntian in my lifetime." Suddenly his heart trembled. On the battlefield, Chu Yang and the others were bravely charging back and forth as if they had entered a no-man's land. Their eyes were on the road and their ears were on the alert. They were unstoppable. Sometimes they were like pillars that blocked thousands of horses and thousands of soldiers. Sometimes they were like meteors that flew across thousands of feet to save their subordinates from danger. Almost everyone seemed to have turned into a 1,000-armed and 1,000-eyed demon god. In this battlefield that was constantly changing, they could actually bring every place under their divine senses. There was nothing that they could not detect, nothing that they could not detect, and nothing that they could not do. Other than General Qin, who was already dead, the general under Yu Qi's command had originally planned to use the advantage of manpower to crush them alive. Obviously his plan would not work anymore. What's more, even charging back and forth, north and south, east and west to help, east and west to kill, Chu Yang and the others' cultivation did not suffer any loss. This was an unbelievable fact that was simply impossible to happen. This fact had already exceeded the cognition of everyone present. Such strength, even the experts of the saint level did not have it, right? But these two people, they clearly only had the cultivation of the celestial being level. At most, they were at the peak of the celestial being level. They definitely had not reached the saint level. What was going on? However, the reality was that these two martial brothers were like mad tigers. As they charged towards Mo Yuntian's group, the people behind them instantly fell to the ground. As they left, the people behind them fell to the ground again. Yao Ningning was dazzled and her blood was boiling as she watched from the side. She almost wanted to applaud and cheer. In the secular world, there was once a saying, no matter how strong a person's martial strength is, he can be a match for 10 or 100 people. But since ancient times, who can really be a match for 10,000 people? Uncle Hu seemed to be very emotional as he witnessed this great battle. He also seemed to be hinting at something. He sighed and said, in the secular world, this saying is often used to warn the younger generation not to rely on individual martial strength. An individual's strength is ultimately limited. The most important thing is always teamwork. But who would know that as long as one's martial strength reaches a certain level, even if one is a match for 10,000 people, what does that count for? It's nothing more than that. Previously, I heard that in the past, the heavenly emperor of purple clouds, Zihao, had once killed 1,000,000 sky fiends with a long roar. After reaching a certain level, the key to determining the outcome of a battle is ultimately the final battle between the leaders of both sides. His words were clearly directed at Yao Ningning, and there was even a hint of preaching hidden within them. But this time, Grand Elder did not refute at all. He did not even show any signs of displeasure. He nodded in agreement and said, yes, at Big Brother Chu's level, although the world is big, there is no place that you can't go. Grand Elder, if you want to become friends with these two people, I'm afraid that Grand Elder's own strength must also rapidly increase. Otherwise, once you are left too far behind, even if they don't mind lowering themselves to befriend you, Grand Elder's heart will always feel a little uncomfortable, right? Uncle Ma took advantage of the opportunity to guide him patiently. What you said makes sense. Yao Ningning's eyes lit up. After I return to the palace this time, I must work hard to cultivate. I must strive to break through my own level as soon as possible and reach an invincible level like Big Brother Chu. If I don't have such a level, how can I truly repay kindness and revenge as I please and laugh proudly in the world? Uncle Hu and Uncle Ma looked at each other. They both felt greatly comforted. After experiencing this unforeseen event, it could finally be said that they did not gain nothing at all. Grand Elder actually knew how to work hard. To the entire demon race, this was also a joyous event that was worth setting off firecrackers. The game company made a picture of the battle. Yes, Midnight. I still quite like it. I immediately uploaded it to public prestige. Everyone, please take out your mobile phones and search for Wind Rides the World on public prestige. Follow me. Then see if this Midnight is to your imagination. Chapter 2164. If one were to talk about the most headache-inducing matter for the Demon Clan's royal family at this moment, it would be none other than this Grand Master was too lazy. He was obviously a talented person who could achieve extraordinary things as long as he put in a little effort. But in terms of cultivation, he was like a fish in the sea muddling along. If he could deal with him, he would deal with him. If he couldn't, he would deal with him. This led to countless resources being wasted or left idle. Now there was finally a glimmer of hope for this Grand Master to work hard. It really wasn't easy. The two of them almost burst into tears, but they were somewhat speechless. This little bit of encouragement actually came from Chu Yang's hands. Mo Yunqian's army, under the repeated attacks, was already in a state of collapse. If they were not fighting in the Demon Emperor sky, but in Mo Yunqian's own territory, these people's morale would have already been reduced to a mess. But this was Demon Emperor Heaven, far away from their homeland. They were unfamiliar with this place. Naturally, no one dared to provoke them if they followed the army. But if they were to become deserters, they might not even be able to survive for a while. Under the ravages of the two madmen and the heavenly poison young Miss Poison Fog of Death, the 15,000 soldiers fell in droves and died in droves. More than half of the soldiers had been lost so far. And Bai Yu Qin and the others were also like mad demons, fighting bravely without any regard for their own safety. But as long as they were in real danger, someone would come to their rescue. Until now, not a single one of them had died. This was really unexplainable. They couldn't block, they couldn't trap, they couldn't kill, they couldn't beat them. 5 out of the 5 generals who led the troops had already died. And all of these 5 people had died for the same reason. They had found out that Chu Yang and Tan Tan couldn't be killed after a fight. So they had simply changed their target. I can't kill you. But can't I kill your subordinates? But it was under this kind of psychological stimulation that when they ruthlessly killed Bai Yu Chen and the others, then, one of the 2 murderous stars would suddenly rush over like a madman. The next moment they would be smashed into pieces. All 5 of them died like this. When the remaining 4 generals saw this, how could they still dare to charge out? They could only choose to stay behind and do their best to arrange and command the troops, hoping for a miracle to happen. They would do their best to put more pressure on the enemy and hope that they could exhaust their combat strength with numbers. This was the best way out of the situation. Or rather, it was the only way. 15,000 people besieging the other side's 32 people, yet they were still able to fight in such a sullen manner. This was truly unheard of. Tan Tan's entire body was covered with cuts and bruises at this moment. It was impossible for him not to get injured while facing the charge of such a 10,000-man army. However, Tan Tan had tried his best to avoid the vital points, joints and tendons of each wound. So, he had sustained many injuries, but they were only superficial wounds. The current him had already gone completely mad. They fought madly and fought madly. His mind was crazy and his soul was crazy. That boundless blood and that boundless battle formation had given Tan Tan an impulse to go crazy and destroy everything. It seemed like only this kind of fierce battle could comfort the dissipation of the Demon King's source spirit. It seemed like only this kind of crazy slaughter could dilute the sadness in his heart. He had always been a simple-minded person in front of the world. But very few people apart from Chu Yang had thought that Tan Tan's heart was also very meticulous. He also cared about some things. For example, family affection. For example, love. For example, friendship. Moreover, Tan Tan and Chu Yang had the same habit. I don't want to lose something once I have it. So much so that he was afraid of losing it. He was afraid of losing it. He was afraid of losing it. The Demon King's source spirit had been Tan Tan's teacher and friend ever since he had awakened. He had accompanied Tan Tan for so many years. Tan Tan had solved countless cultivation problems, cultivation bottlenecks, and life problems with his help. He had always stepped forward bravely in times of crisis, and had put an end to the disaster. Now, at this moment, such a good teacher and friend had disappeared forever. It was easy to imagine how sad Tan Tan's heart was. However, Tan Tan couldn't continue to feel sad while facing Chu Yang and the others. He could only bury this emotion deep in his heart after he had cried once. He didn't dare to reveal it in the slightest. He continued to use his nonsensical ways, his usual heartless and narcissistic ways to disguise himself as a person. But he no longer concealed himself in this fierce battle. I want your disappearance to be filled with the dignity of the Demon King. I want your disappearance to be filled with the glory of the Demon King. The demon soul exists forever in the heavens and the earth. This glory belongs to me and also to you. Ah! Tan Tan roared and jumped high into the air. His body spun rapidly in the air like a spinning top, and turned into a fuzzy shadow. The next moment, an exceptionally rich devil energy suddenly emerged from his body. The devil energy crisscrossed and formed a huge black crown on his head. Crown me! Tan Tan roared towards the sky. Tears flew out of his eyes. Goodbye. This move was the most powerful move that the Demon King had passed on to him. Sovereign as devil. The ultimate move of the Demon King's coronation. In an instant, everyone on the battlefield had an illusion at the same time. All the weapons and hidden weapons that they had never seen before in the world shot out from that high and mighty crown. It carried a strong aura of death. Countless black gas condensed into all kinds of weapons, hidden weapons and weapons. They poured down from the sky like a torrential downpour. Such power was abundant and irresistible. Puff, puff, puff. The sound of hidden weapons piercing into human bodies was like rain hitting a sandpit. There was no way to defend against this wave of attacks. This was because this was a super dense, large-scale attack that was indiscriminate. Even if one could defend one side, they would not be able to defend against the other. Even if one put up an all-around defensive net and protective shield, they would only fall into an awkward situation of being weak everywhere. There were endless screams and wails below. Mo Yun Tian soldiers fell down one after another. Fresh blood poured out as if it was free of charge. There was only one black figure standing proudly in the air. He had a crown on his head and he looked disdainfully at the world. He stood tall and straight. His whole body emitted a cold and ruthless aura. It was as if all living beings were just ants in the eyes of this figure. With one move, the entire army was destroyed. Divine Soul. Chu Yang suddenly roared. With this super outburst of Tan Tan's wave, it formed an extremely large-scale killing power. Although it was enough to make anyone's heart cold, Chu Yang also clearly knew that this move was probably Tan Tan's last crazy move. It was also the last move to send off the Demon King's original soul. It was the last outburst. After this move, Tan Tan was bound to fall into a period of extreme exhaustion and weakness. He looked awe-inspiring and murderous at the moment. However, Tan Tan would be in an unprecedentedly dangerous moment when he would become weak in the next moment. I finished going crazy. I finished going crazy. After receiving this command, the Tribulation Divine Soul let out a long roar, and suddenly transformed in the air. Laughing strangely, he rushed into the crowd with black smoke all the way. Wherever he passed, all the soul power was swept away by him. All the death energy suddenly turned into the origin power of the Tribulation Divine Soul. Puff puff puff. With this, nearly 300 people's heads exploded under the Tribulation Divine Soul's sweep. Kill them all. Tan Tan roared with great momentum. Kill them all. Bai Yu Qin and the others had been sullen for such a long time. Now that they finally got a chance to vent their anger, they naturally fought with all their might. The enemy's camp, which was originally exceptionally thick and boundless, slowly became sparse. The Mo Yun Tian Army's battle formation, which had a total of 15,000 people, only lasted for 3 hours under the combined devastation of these 32 people. Unexpectedly, they were all killed and injured. The number of people who could still fight now was less than 1,000. The Tribulation Divine Soul crashed into the last remaining crowd. The Tribulation Divine Soul had been nourished repeatedly, and his strength had been completely restored. The destructive power produced at this moment could be said to be infinitely terrifying. Moreover, there was the heavenly poison young miss behind him, and the Tribulation Sword Master behind her. They were all killing machines, super killing machines that harvested human lives. It's over. Meng Wuya sighed with some pain. This battle, where the disparity in manpower was great, but the final outcome was completely reversed, finally ended. As far as the eye could see, there were corpses everywhere. Chu Yang waved his hand. Bai Yu Qin and the others supported each other and gradually retreated from the battlefield, leaving only Chu Yang alone. Chu Yang straightened his body and suddenly waved his hand in Meng Wuya's direction. An extremely powerful force gradually condensed in this space. It was as if countless tornadoes had suddenly appeared in the air. Therefore, the large number of corpses on the ground were actually swept up by this invisible wind. They slowly gathered together and finally formed a neat square. This extremely precise and superb control caused Meng Wuya and all of his subordinates to suck in a breath of cold air. Chu Yang can still have such power in the midst of such a great battle. Meng Wuya stared at Chu Yang with a complicated gaze. It could not be denied that there was deep wariness hidden in his eyes. Chu Yang said lightly, I heard that Marshal Mo Yun Tian you personally came to kill me, but I did not have the chance to meet you. It is really regretful. I did not welcome Marshal Yu's arrival. It is really impolite. Chapter 2165. Just now I am a little tired. If General Meng did not have his teachings, Chu Yang would like to leave and find a place to rest. Chu Yang smiled, his handsome face remaining calm. A total of 15,000 enemies were wiped out. Then giving the corpses as gifts to the enemy's commander. Chu Yang's actions were almost crazy. But Meng Wuya deeply understood that this was not because Chu Yang was inhuman, cruel and merciless, but because Chu Yang was using such actions to express the anger in his heart. Perhaps there was a deeper meaning behind these words. These corpses are a warning from Chu Yang. If anyone else came, the result would be the same as these corpses. Or it could be said that this was a challenge. A challenge to the entire ink cloud sky. Chu Yang, I admit that your strength has increased greatly, and this old man knows that I'm powerless against you. However, you've acted so arrogantly this time. Isn't it a bit too much? Meng Wuya's expression was bleak as he said, I did not do my best and have been punished by the Sky Emperor. After this, I will return to Ink Cloud Sky to receive my punishment. You and I may not have the chance to meet again. Meng Wuya said heavily, it is no longer important who is right and who is wrong in this matter. But before I leave, I still have to give you a word of advice. Consider it a little communication between you and me. Chu Yang took a deep breath and his expression turned solemn. Please speak. Meng Wuya was silent for a while. The world is big and there are many experts. There is always someone better than you. It is definitely something you cannot imagine. This sentence seemed to be an empty statement that had no meaning at all. Hearing this, Chu Yang was unexpectedly silent for a while. After thinking for a while, he finally said seriously, Thank you very much. Meng Wuya's expression was still heavy as he nodded slightly. He had always felt guilty and had a good impression of this young man in front of him. After today there was a great chance that they would part forever. He would rather use this last chance to give this young man a word of advice with all the experience he had accumulated in his life. Chu Yang suddenly raised his head and said, General Meng, to return the favor, I also have to give you a word of advice. Meng Wuya sighed. Please speak. Chu Yang said softly, I believe that Marshal Yu will have experts of the saint level under his command this time. But in this battle, including the canyon, I have never met one. With our strength, even if we can't change the battle situation when facing experts of that level, we would not have suffered as little loss as now. Chu Yang completely ignored Meng Wuya's increasingly ugly expression and continued to say, Elder Meng, your situation in Ink Cloud Sky is not good. Meng Wuya's face was expressionless as he said indifferently, Chu Yang, the mountains are high and the rivers are long. He waved his hand and was about to leave. Chu Yang smiled faintly. He didn't say any more superfluous words and turned to leave. However, at this moment, with a loud bang, the sky suddenly darkened without any warning. From the dark Yama gorge that Chu Yang and the others had come out from, countless things suddenly rushed out with a crashing sound. Bang, 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 bang. A cold voice said, Chu Yang, not only did you give me those gifts, you also gave me these gifts. Everyone's expression changed. Looking closely, they were all shocked. What fell from the sky were also many corpses. Just by looking, there were at least 4,000 to 5,000 people. The previously empty space suddenly turned into a sea of blood and a mountain of corpses piled high. A burly figure walked out step by step from the Yama Gorge with a gloomy face. You lie. Marshal Yu of Ink Cloud Sky. He had rushed here at such a delicate moment. Following behind him was a large group of military officers from Mo Yuntian. Every one of them had a dense murderous aura around them. The way they looked at Chu Yang was as if they wished they could swallow him whole. Yu Lai and the others had been waiting on the other side to completely cut off Chu Yang's possible escape route. But after waiting for more than a day, they still did not see the people inside come out. Everyone was a little surprised by this result. According to the predetermined strategy, no matter what, someone should have come out now. Even if Chu Yang and the others did not come out, their men should have come out. The delay of information was the biggest taboo of a military strategist. So Yu Lai could only send people in to investigate. But after sending 3 batches of people, there was no news at all. Yu Lai knew that something must have happened. He immediately led 100 trusted experts into the Yama Gorge. By this time, the poison that Chu Lur had set up had begun to weaken. Besides, these people were all top experts. After discovering that there was poison, Yu Lai immediately used the Saint's conveyor technique to empty the surrounding air. Then he wrapped everyone with his deep cultivation and walked all the way in. But after entering for a short distance, they found a large number of corpses. But in that dark place where there was no light, even with Yu Lai, they could not tell whether these corpses were the enemy or their own people. After searching for a while, relying on some things that the corpses were wearing, they could tell that all the corpses were their own people. How did our people die here? Yu Lai ordered to bring the corpses and continue to move forward. But they did not expect that there would be more and more corpses in front. Searching one by one to confirm their identity would be too late. Yu Lai ordered to bring all the corpses. When they got out, they would check these corpses again to see how many of them were their own subordinates and how many were their enemies. But the further they went, the more corpses there were. These 100 people collected all the corpses along the way. Their storage rings were almost full before they finally finished collecting. The storage rings of more than a dozen super experts were all full. How much storage was there? Yu Lai and the others rushed all the way and finally came to the entrance of the Yama Gorge. But they unexpectedly heard the conversation between Chu Yang and Meng Wuya. For a moment they could not help but fume with anger. Deputy Commander Yu, Meng Wuya cupped his hands and was about to explain when he was interrupted by Yu Lai. Shut up. Meng Wuya, what face do you have to talk to me? Meng Wuya said lightly, I do not think that I have neglected my duties. What is Commander Yu's accusation? Bullshit. Yu Chi flew into a rage. I let you command and you command them to death? Is this still not neglecting your duties? How do you still want to neglect your duties? Meng Wuya said lightly, it's not that I don't want to command. But Deputy Commander, you should understand your own subordinates. Will they listen to my command? We know each other well. Do you really want to say it out loud? Yu Lai said angrily, then tell me, why is not a single one of your subordinates dead? The facts are in front of your eyes and you still want to talk glibly and quibble. Meng Wuya said lightly, that is also because Deputy Commander, you had ordered me to not continue to participate in this extermination. Yu Lai was so angry that he laughed. So, you and Chu Yang appreciating each other, talking and laughing together, and betraying the secrets of my Mo Yuntian, was also ordered by me? Meng Wuya said lightly, This argument is only Deputy Commander Yu's side of the story. I have a clear conscience and am worthy of the billions of lives in Mo Yuntian. This is enough. Presumptuous. Yu Lai scolded, you have already confided in the enemy, and you still dare to talk about having a clear conscience? No wonder you led so many people to chase after Chu Yang but were defeated. It turns out that you already had a rebellious heart and had no intention of avenging the Grand Prince. Meng Wuya, you are a traitor of Mo Yuntian. When this sentence came out, no matter how good Meng Wuya's temper and self-restraint were, he would still be furious. Even the Dream Slayer army generals behind him were inexplicably indignant at this moment. We have more than 10,000 people chasing after Chu Yang and lost more than 8,000 people. Now you are saying that we are traitors? Please think more when you speak, Deputy Commander Yu. We, the Dream Slayer army, are definitely not traitors and will never become traitors. Meng Wuya's face turned cold. Therefore, I do not dare to accept the word, traitor. Yu Lai's murderous aura was heavy. Meng Wuya, from what you said, I am wrong to say that you are a traitor? Meng Wuya was not afraid. He said, yes, Deputy Commander Yu's words are indeed thoughtless. Yu Lai's face suddenly turned black. He turned his head and looked at Chu Yang. In a deep voice he said, Chu Yang, I have long heard of your great name. Just an ant like you can make us, the people of Moyun Heaven, go to war. This is really something to be proud of. At this moment, in this situation, don't you want to say something? Chu Yang was a little confused. Yu Lai was obviously happily arguing with Meng Wuya, but when the internal conflict was fierce, he suddenly turned his head to talk to him. Moreover, he said something that did not make sense. He could not help but roll his eyes and said, say something? What is there to say? Alright, I still have something to say. What I want to say is very simple. You Moyun Tian people can be my enemy in this life. Even if you die in the Yellow Springs, it is something to be proud of. Yu Lai's words were full of arrogance and condescension. But Chu Yang's counterattack was even more ruthless and did not leave any leeway. The positions of both sides were clear. Naturally, there was no need to leave any leeway in the conversation. To be hypocritical and courteous at such a time would only lower his own status. Yu Lai's face was cold. He said with hatred, Chu Yang, you have always been talking about unfairness. It is our Moyun Heaven that has let you down. Now I will give you a fair chance. You have just finished a great battle. You must be very tired and have little strength to fight again. I will give you a chance to recuperate on one side. When you are full of energy, we will continue this battle. Chu Yang squinted his eyes and said with a smile, you are indeed the commander of Moyun Heaven. How imposing. But I don't know what kind of fair chance Deputy Commander Yu is giving me? Is it the hundreds of people here fighting me alone? Or is it me fighting more than 100 of you alone? Yu Lai said faintly, you'll know later what this marshal's tongue is like. Then he turned his head and no longer paid attention to Chu Yang. Chu Yang laughed. He simply sat cross-legged on the ground and started to recuperate. Chapter 2166. Just as Yu Qi had said, Chu Yang really couldn't leave now. If he left now, Yu Qi would start chasing after him. If that was the case, Chu Yang and Tan Tan would have the ability to escape, but Bai Yu Qin and the others wouldn't be able to. After all, the people who came with Yu Qi this time were all top-notch experts. There were as many as 5 top-notch experts who had reached the saint level. Yu Qi himself was a saint-level expert. Among the 4 early-stage saint experts under him, one of them was at the peak of the early-stage saint level. The others were at least at the celestial level, and they were all at the peak of the celestial level. If such a team were to pursue and kill Bai Yu Qin and the others at all costs, it wouldn't be as easy as turning over one's hand, or as effortless as blowing off dust. But it would still be a sure thing. If one were to exclude Chu Yang, Tan Tan, and the Tribulation Divine Soul and Chu Yang's entire team, then only Bai Yu Qin and the other 2 people would have a little bit of strength to fight. The others would basically be in a bad situation where they would die at the first touch. Now that Yu Qi had caught up, it wasn't realistic for Chu Yang to want to escape, unless he could bear to abandon the majority of the people. Only a few people escaped. But Chu Yang definitely couldn't do such a thing. In the current situation, he could only wait and see, and then act according to the circumstances. Seeing Chu Yang return, Yu Qi turned his head again to look at Meng Wuya, but the murderous aura in his eyes was getting stronger and stronger. The promise he made before was true, and there was nothing strange about it. The reason why he didn't hesitate to give Chu Yang a condition first was to take down Meng Wuya first. As long as he took down Meng Wuya, it was equivalent to breaking Meng Wuya's boss, Mu Shuai's arm. Meng Wuya disregarded the emperor's grace and betrayed the enemy. The evidence of his crime is conclusive. He ignored the blood feud and treated the heavenly emperor's order as a joke. He colluded with the enemy and destroyed more than 20,000 of my Moyen Sky's elite men. Such a despicable act is really a heinous crime. His crime is unforgivable. His subordinates, the dream executioners, are all in cahoots with him. If we don't get rid of these traitors, we won't be able to appease the anger of the people. If we don't kill them, we won't be able to appease the souls of the 20,000 heroes in heaven. Yu Qi's voice was deep and slow. He looked at Meng Wuya with a gaze as cold as ice. Every word and sentence seemed to be chasing after the soul. His voice was cold and chilling. Fellow comrades, I, Yu Qi, will represent Lord Sky Emperor to give the order today. This Mo Yuntian rebel, Meng Wuya, will be arrested on the spot. If he resists, kill him immediately. Understood. More than 100 people behind Yu Qi revealed a cruel and bloodthirsty expression. Wait. Meng Wuya shouted and looked at Yu Qi. Vice Marshal Yu, even if I am guilty, I still need to return to Ink Cloud Sky and let Lord Sky Emperor judge. Vice Marshal Yu, you don't have the right to determine whether I am dead or alive. Yu Qi said coldly, Traitor, you are still talking nonsense. A despicable person like you, everyone has the right to kill you. He raised his hand and there was already a token in his hand. When I first arrived at Demon Emperor Heaven, I have already sent back the news. Meng Wuya has rebelled against Ink Cloud Sky Emperor and is in cahoots with Chu Yang and the rest. Lord Sky Emperor has already ordered me to handle this matter with full authority. Meng Wuya, do you still want to go back to Ink Cloud Sky to explain? You are destined to have no hope in this life. Meng Wuya was so angry that his whole body was shaking. He couldn't believe that Yu Qi would actually do anything to frame him. It was even more unbelievable that he had already become a traitor in Ink Cloud Sky. Just because of Yu Qi's one-sided statement, Heavenly Emperor Ink Cloud concluded that he had betrayed Ink Cloud Sky. When the dream executioners behind him heard that, they all revealed an extremely angry expression. There was even an indescribable grievance in them. In order to complete the mission, so many of our comrades died. Just because of a few words we became traitors? Is there still justice in this world? Bathing in blood and killing for 100,000 miles, fighting alone far away from home, not familiar with the place, who knows how much suffering, how much grievance, how much humiliation, and how much humiliation they actually became traitors? Meng Wuya looked up to the sky and sighed. He only felt an indescribable bitterness in his heart. He was actually speechless for a long time. Deputy Commander Yu, I know your target is me. I will surrender myself. Meng Wuya said bitterly, It's just that, I don't know if you can let these brothers of mine go. If I am worried that they will turn on me, I will let them disband on the spot and never return to Ink Cloud Sky. They will fend for themselves in Ink Cloud Sky. Looking at Yu Qi's posture, Meng Wuya already knew that he would definitely not allow him to return to Ink Cloud Sky alive this time. Whether he resisted or not, the outcome was already destined. When he thought of this, he couldn't help but feel disheartened. Great General! Countless officers shouted, No matter what, we will not abandon the Great General and escape alone. Since Yu Qi wants to kill us, then let's fight it out with him. Yes, fight it out with them. Fight to the death, fight to the death, fight to the death. For a moment, the crowd was in an uproar. Yu Qi sneered, As expected, you are all jackals of the same tribe, traitors. Kill all of these traitors for me, don't leave anyone alive. Meng Wuya looked up to the sky and sighed, his expression sorrowful. If you want to condemn someone, you can always find a reason to do so. Marshal Yu's actions are indeed dignified, he takes care of everything. Haha, I, Meng Wuya, was born in Ink Cloud Sky, I grew up in Ink Cloud Sky, I was born as a person of Ink Cloud Sky, I will die as a person of Ink Cloud Sky, I have been through hundreds of battles, I have been loyal to His Majesty, I have never done anything deceitful, but I never thought that today I will become traitors of Ink Cloud Sky. Now that I've become a traitor to the Heavenly Court, where is justice? Where is justice? Meng Wuya looked up to the sky and laughed maniacally, but that laughter sounded like he was crying. Behind him, the thousands of Dream Slayer army soldiers all felt the same, they were all about to cry. They had fought for Ink Cloud Sky all their lives, they had no regrets, they were good men, they threw their heads and spilled their blood. When had they ever feared death? Who would have thought that they would become traitors of the land they protected? Ah, ridiculous, ridiculous. Indeed, justice is not in the human heart. Right and wrong is up to people to say. Meng Wuya looked up to the sky and laughed, his tears finally rolling down, his eyes full of desolation. Yu Qi's face was like iron, he waved his hand and shouted, "Everyone, what are you still hesitating for? Take down the traitor in front of you as soon as possible. First, quell the internal strife, kill the traitor, then go to the foreign invaders, take revenge, ink Cloud Sky's prestige, today is the day." He waved his hand, the clear sky was suddenly dyed black, a voice full of majesty said, "Take down Meng Wuya, kill the traitor, purge the heavenly court." Everyone heard it clearly, this voice was the voice of Heavenly Emperor Ink Cloud Yuan Tianjie himself. When this voice came out, Meng Wuya and all the Dream Slayer army felt like they were struck by lightning, each of them trembling all over. Heavenly Emperor Ink Cloud personally said that Meng Wuya was a traitor? Then it would no longer be a case of 3 people becoming a tiger, or public opinion, but it would definitely happen. In other words, this was already an ironclad case, even if there was no shadow at all, it had now become a fact. The last bit of hope in Meng Wuya's heart completely collapsed at this moment. A person whose heart had already been shattered, even if he was a saint, so what? Yu Qi looked at Meng Wuya cruelly and proudly and shouted, "Obey the Emperor's order, everyone kill." Roger. The aura of more than 100 experts under his command became stronger, and they roared in unison. Then more than 100 people moved together, closing in on Meng Wuya and the others, overflowing with murderous intent. Meng Wuya's expression was inexplicably sorrowful, his lips trembling. His eyes, which had always been wise in the past, were now a little frantic and confused. It was as if his life's belief and persistence had all collapsed at this moment. Behind him, more than 1,300 Dream Slayer army people were also in a daze. Shwa. The hundreds of Ink Cloud guards who had survived the previous battle suddenly retreated in an orderly manner, pulling away from the Dream Slayer army. At this time they were retreating to make their position clear. We have nothing to do with Meng Wuya. They were not Meng Wuya's direct subordinates, but belonged to the royal family of Ink Cloud Sky, so this was not adding insult to injury. Now that the situation was clear, Meng Wuya and the Dream Slayer army had been convicted of treason, so it was not strange that they wanted to protect themselves. In an extremely quiet place, only the sound of the footsteps of more than 100 people could be heard slowly moving forward, rustling. The sound of tears falling down, those were the tears of the Dream Slayer army soldiers. The distance between the two sides was getting closer and closer. General is not a traitor. We are not traitors. Suddenly, a Dream Slayer army deputy general's face was full of tears, and he screamed at the top of his lungs. As he screamed, he suddenly rushed out without caring about his own safety. We are not traitors. We have never been traitors. His body trembled and he opened his hands. We want to see His Majesty the Sky Emperor to explain. This is Yu Qi's trap. General Meng is innocent, we are innocent. We want to see His Majesty the Sky Emperor. However, more than 100 people opposite him did not say a word, their expressions were cold, and they stared at him coldly. A sword light suddenly flew out. Wu Changfeng. Get out of the way. Meng Wuya shouted. But the deputy general called Wu Changfeng did not react at all. He opened his hands and blocked in front of everyone, shouting, "General Meng is not a traitor, we are innocent." Like a bolt of lightning, the sword light pierced into his heart. At this point, Wu Changfeng's voice came to an abrupt end, and he looked at the sharp sword in his chest in confusion. Suddenly he shouted heartbreakingly, "We are innocent." His majestic body suddenly fell forward, and thick blood slowly spread under his body. Meng Wuya's eyes were wide open and he shouted, "Yu Qi, no matter what crime we bear now, we still have to go back to Mo Yin Tian, we should at least have a chance to appeal. Why do you want to kill us now?" Yu Qi said indifferently, "You still want to go back to Mo Yin Tian? You still want a chance to appeal? Should I say that you are blindly loyal or stupid? Or are you a complete idiot?" He waved his hand coldly and shouted, "Kill, leave no one alive." Yu Qi had prepared all of this for a long time. When he first came out, he had not met with Meng Wuya and had not investigated at all. He had already sent back news that Meng Wuya was chasing Chu Yang, and there was something fishy about it. Chapter 2167. With Meng Wuya's combat strength and the strength he possessed, Meng Wuya could easily defeat him. It was absolutely impossible to not catch a junior who only had the strength of a saint. Then, in an extremely short period of time, he sent back 3 messages in a row, saying that Meng Wuya and Chu Yang appreciated each other, saying that Meng Wuya was too critical of the deceased, and then went one step further, saying that Meng Wuya and Chu Yang colluded, and when he sent another message he simply said that Meng Wuya was very dissatisfied with the way His Majesty handled things, and already had the heart of disobedience, and so on. Pushing forward step by step, layer by layer, gradually made Heaven Emperor Mo Yun, under the pain and anger of losing his beloved, finally issued a secret order to capture Meng Wuya. Under such circumstances, how could Yu Qi let Meng Wuya return to Mo Yun Tian alive? Once he returned, wouldn't all the schemes he had set up this time be for naught? Moreover, Meng Wuya always had Marshal Mu over there to protect him. No matter how bad it was, he would not die. Meng Wuya not only had the cultivation of a saint, but he was also a rather important figure in Marshal Mu's group. Killing Meng Wuya would undoubtedly be a considerable blow to Marshal Mu's group. As long as Meng Wuya died here, there would be no evidence. Then whatever he said would be the truth. If he said to rebel, he would rebel. If he said to resist arrest, he would resist arrest. Anyway, at this moment in Demon Emperor Heaven, only he, Yu Qi's people, could survive. Whatever he said was the truth. Who could refute? After returning, he could even use Meng Wuya's matter this time to ruthlessly attack Marshal Mu's faction in the military. It was a good thing to kill two birds with one stone. In any case, the situation of losing soldiers and generals had already been decided. With Meng Wuya as a scapegoat for colluding with foreign enemies, how could they not make good use of him? All the losses would logically become targeted targets. After killing Meng Wuya and then taking down Chu Yang and the others, he would only have a great merit and not an inch of fault. What was killing two birds with one stone? Wasn't this killing two birds with one stone? Yu Qi was pleased in his heart, but his face did not show it. His eyes were full of righteous indignation, as if he was really facing a traitor. Meng Wuya trembled all over. Looking at Wu Changfeng's corpse lying stiffly on the ground, the muscles on his face spasmed, and 2 lines of clear tears flowed down his cheeks. Meng Wuya, you colluded with Mo Yun Tian's enemy, the evidence is irrefutable. Why don't you surrender? A master said coldly. Suddenly the dream army became noisy. Our general is not a traitor, we are not a traitor. The generals under Meng Wuya's command had a firm look on their faces as they shouted, "We have followed General Meng for tens of thousands of years. We have been through a bloody path. If we wanted to rebel, we would have done so long ago. We swear that we will not admit to our crimes even if we die. Protect General Meng and return to Ink Cloud Sky to plead our case to His Majesty the Emperor. It's Han. Follow me. Let's fight with these despicable people. Protect General Meng." Meng Changfeng as generals, led the soldiers, led Wuya and generals Yu and S people's people, kill and killed. Yu Qi ordered loudly. He did not intend to leave anyone alive. Now the Dream Army's actions gave him an excuse to do so. Therefore more than 100 masters attacked at the same time. The Dream Army's zombies also rushed forward fearlessly. The internal battle of Mo Yun Tian immediately began. The moment the two sides came into contact, the scene was extremely tragic. Almost at the moment of collision, countless pieces of flesh and blood flew everywhere. More than 100 Dream Army soldiers fell down. Although they had the advantage in numbers, their cultivation level was far from the opponents. They were not a match at all. Meng Wuya stood there in a daze. His eyes were empty and his mind was no longer there. However, a drop of blood splattered onto his face, causing his face to twitch. Following that, more drops of blood splattered onto his face. Meng Wuya's body suddenly trembled, as if he had just woken up from a dream. Seeing that his subordinates were being slaughtered, Meng Wuya's eyes widened and his hair stood up in anger. "General, hurry up and leave." A deputy general vomited blood and shouted in grief and indignation, "Only if we go back alive can we have the chance to complain. This is clearly Yuji's trap. They want to kill all of us. General, hurry up and leave." Countless people shouted together. They used their lives and their bodies to stop the enemy and give Meng Wuya a chance to escape. At this moment, Meng Wuya almost cried. "Brothers, you are too stupid. Why don't you understand? His Majesty the Sky Emperor has already said that we are rebels. Even if we go back and meet His Majesty the Sky Emperor, how can this result be changed? Even if he knew that he was in the wrong, how could a celestial emperor go back on his word and retract his order for a subordinate?" Blood continued to splatter and people continued to fall. Meng Wuya's eyes gradually turned red. Suddenly there was a loud roar and an extremely powerful force suddenly appeared. It separated the two sides. Bang! Meng Wuya's palms smashed the head of the Dream Slayer Army's expert. Blood splattered everywhere. Meng Wuya's body flashed and he stood straight in front of his subordinates. He stared at the 100 experts in front of him and said hoarsely, "Come at me. Don't kill my brothers." His voice was hoarse and low, but it was filled with despair and madness. He paused, then used all his strength to shout, "Don't kill my brothers." Bang! His clothes suddenly exploded, revealing the soft armor underneath. The jade belt that bound his hair exploded with a bang, and his long hair fluttered in the air. His aura of death was impressively displayed. "Meng Wuya, you finally stopped hiding and attacked your comrades." The person in front looked at Meng Wuya with some mockery. "You finally want to face the Sky Emperor's power? If you attack, you will be accused of treason." Meng Wuya smiled bitterly. "If I don't attack, the result will be like this, won't it?" At this point, I, Meng Wuya, have nothing to say. Even if I, Meng Wuya, die, I have a clear conscience. Can you all have a clear conscience? Justice is in everyone's heart. Black is black, white is white. Meng Wuya said hoarsely. When he said this, he was filled with a sense of powerlessness. Obviously, he knew that things had come to this point. Justice was no longer in everyone's heart. How could he distinguish between black and white? As long as he died, everything related to him would sink to the bottom of the sea forever. He would never be able to rise again. "Ah. Meng Wuya, since you jumped out yourself, we will not have any psychological burden to deal with you." The person laughed. "Come forward and accept your death." More than 100 people launched a new round of attacks at the same time. Boundless violent chi raged, covering the sky and the earth. It enveloped Meng Wuya and the Dream Slayer army. "I said come at me. Don't kill my brothers." Meng Wuya roared and fought back with all his strength. With a boom, the two sides once again fell into a bitter and bloody battle. Yu Chi still stood at the edge of the battlefield with his hands behind his back. He looked indifferently at the flesh and blood flying everywhere. His originally calm face finally showed a cruel and ferocious smile. As long as Meng Wuya died, his Dream Slayer army would inevitably collapse. His strength would be on par with Martial Mu. It would not be a waste to sacrifice so many people's lives. At this moment, the Dream Slayer army was inexplicably sad and indignant. Under such a groundless injustice, everyone exerted 120% of their strength and fought with all their might. They knew that their strength was not enough, but they still fought to the last moment. Everyone in the Dream Slayer army was so angry that they were about to explode. Every one of us is loyal and devoted, and we do our best to serve our country. When have we ever betrayed our country? 10,000 people went on an expedition. Along the way, more than 8,000 of their brothers were buried in a foreign land. In the end, was the only thing they got in exchange for a crime of treason? Bang! Meng Wuya slapped the chest of a celestial being expert in front of him. That person flew backward with blood spurting out. His sternum caved in. It was obvious that he was dead. Clang! Meng Wuya's long sword suddenly broke. Then a palm imprinted on his back. He staggered and turned his head to look. A middle-aged man with a white face and no beard was looking at him with a gloomy expression. "White-faced wolf, it's you. You've been waiting for this day for a long time, haven't you?" Meng Wuya laughed bitterly. This white-faced wolf was Meng Wuya's mortal enemy in Mo Yun Tian. This time he finally seized the opportunity. Naturally, he would use his strength to deal with Meng Wuya. White-faced wolf sneered, "Everyone has the right to kill those who betray the country. As a citizen of Mo Yun Tian, everyone has the right to do so. As a soldier, I have the duty to do so." Meng Wuya laughed mockingly. Good, good, good. I didn't expect that the white-faced wolf, who has always cheated and deceived his superiors and subordinates, would be so righteous today. Admirable, admirable, ha!" White-faced wolf's face darkened. He immediately attacked again. Meng Wuya retreated like a whirlwind. He brazenly charged into the enemy's crowd. He finally had no more scruples in his heart. He made up his mind and attacked with all his strength. I didn't expect that I, Meng Wuya, who had fought for Mo Yun Tian for my entire life, would actually fight with Mo Yun Tian's fellow soldiers. Fighting to the death with my former comrades. I actually died in the hands of my own people. Sure enough, the heavens are watching. That day I ignored justice and deceived Chu Yang. Today it may be my retribution. Meng Wuya suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes were about to split open. Dying in the hands of treacherous villains like you, I really can't die in peace. He looked up to the sky and roared, I hate why I didn't make up my mind earlier and leave the army to fight the heavenly demons. Even if I died in the hands of the heavenly demons, it would be much more glorious than today's ending. The loyalty I had in the past is actually so laughable. As a person, I really can't have a guilty conscience. Otherwise, I will regret it for life. Yu Qi stood with his hands behind his back and said coldly, "Shut him up. A battle is a battle. Don't tell me you're still composing poems while fighting. Regret for life? I'll give you a bargain. Die. The so-called regret will end at the moment of death." Chapter 2168. Everyone agreed and attacked even more fiercely. One by one, the soldiers of the Dream Slayer army fell down in grief and indignation. One of the soldiers leaped into the air, ignoring the swords and sabers raining down on him like a torrential downpour. He desperately hugged a celestial being expert and bit down viciously without any regard for the rules. The celestial being expert shouted coldly, "You're courting death." Hundreds of palms landed on the soldier's body, but he refused to let go. He hugged his opponent tightly. Even though his entire chest was bleeding, he still refused to let go. The few soldiers of the Dream Slayer army next to him all fused with their swords and flew over on their swords. They first pierced through their comrade's body and then crashed into the celestial being expert with their swords. In an instant, the celestial being expert, who was still showing off his strength, turned into a human-shaped hedgehog. He roared with all his might, killing the soldiers that were hanging on his body one by one. He tried futilely to stuff his internal organs that had already flowed out back into his stomach. He struggled to survive, but he was sent flying by another person. He flew away together with his internal organs. He screamed miserably. Finally he collapsed and breathed his last. This battle was just the tip of the iceberg. The intensity of the battle had reached its climax. Yang, who was recuperating, was also shocked. Especially when he heard Meng Wuya's words, his heart suddenly moved inexplicably. "I hate it. I hate that I didn't make up my mind to leave the army and fight the extraterrestrial demons. Even if I died at the hands of the extraterrestrial demons, it would be much more glorious than today's ending." That was Meng Wuya's roar, and it was also his inner thoughts at the moment. Chu Yang's eyes focused and he could not help but think. The divine spirit of calamity flew out silently again and carefully entered the battlefield. On one hand, it greedily swallowed the extremely pure aura of the dead. On the other hand, it killed silently. With the addition of such a strong force, and the addition of the sneak attack, more than a dozen of the masters who had besieged Meng Wuya and the Dream Slayer army fell inexplicably in an instant. During this period of time, the divine soul of calamity had not only absorbed a sufficient amount of the aura of death, but its quality was also sufficiently pure. His overall strength had not only recovered to its original state, but it had also improved a lot compared to when he was in the divine source realm. Previously, his level of cultivation was slightly lower than Meng Wuya's, but now he had surpassed him. Moreover, he was already infinitely close to the peak of the elementary level of the Sage Realm. He was only one step away from reaching the next level of the Sage Realm. With this strength, if he wanted to deal with Yu Qi one-on-one and easily take her down, he would still need to rely on the characteristics of the divine soul of calamity to fight a protracted battle to have a stable chance of winning. But to deal with the more than 100 people here, most of whom were at the celestial being level, it was more than enough. It could even be said that it was as easy as flipping one's hand. Meng Wuya suddenly felt that the pressure on his body was greatly reduced. Although he didn't see anything, he had fought with the divine soul of calamity before. In an instant, he knew that the divine soul of calamity must have made a move. Among the three parties present, only this guy could do it without leaving a trace. But he didn't say anything, just continued to fight. Now was really not the time to say anything. Whether it was thanks or anything else, it would only remind the other party to be on guard. Even if he exposed this point, it might have a negative impact on his own people. Now Meng Wuya hated Yu Qi's people to the extreme. How could he remind them? Even though he was unwilling to be saved by the enemy, he couldn't care about anything else. Taking advantage of the divine soul of calamity's great power, Meng Wuya finally had a chance to catch his breath. The next moment, an ancient monster with bright starlight suddenly escaped from his arms. As soon as this thing was taken out, there was suddenly a boundless pressure suddenly descending, and everyone present was shocked. Yu Qi, who was watching the battle with his hands behind his back, was shocked and shouted, "Wind and thunder destruction." He flew up and was about to stop Meng Wuya's hand. Meng Wuya said in a low voice, "Please block Yu Qi." The volume of his words was extremely low. Even the people opposite him might not know who he was talking to and what he meant. But the divine soul of calamity immediately understood. When the wind and thunder destruction was taken out just now, the divine soul of Calamity's heart immediately beat like a drum, and wanted to withdraw from the battle. After all, he still had lingering fear of the wind and thunder destruction. But Meng Wuya's words at this moment just happened to be what he wanted. Not only did he not want to withdraw, but his fighting spirit also increased greatly. He didn't want to be buried with these people. He had suffered from this thing for the first time. It was because he had experienced the horror of this thing that the divine soul of Calamity didn't dare to try it a second time even if he was beaten to death. And if he interfered with Yu Qi, who had not yet joined the battle, not only could he completely avoid this thing, but he could also block the opponent's strongest master. He could use this opportunity to test his own strength in order to break through. It was a good thing to kill several birds with one stone. Immediately he turned around and rushed towards Yu Qi. The divine soul of Calamity simply stopped hiding and laughed strangely. "Deputy Commander Yu, come, let me be intimate with you." In the blink of an eye, he had already left the battlefield and turned into a black fog, facing Yu Qi head-on. Yu Qi was shocked when he saw this divine soul of Calamity. Yu Qi was also a master of the art of war. He immediately understood why the current battle situation was so strange. His side clearly had an overwhelming advantage, but he didn't know why the situation suddenly reversed. It turned out that it was this divine soul of Calamity that was causing trouble. "Meng Wuya, you really colluded with Chuyang. Now, do you still have any grievances to complain about?" Yu Qi roared, intending to completely shake the Dream Slayer army's morale, but the divine soul of Calamity had already pounced on him with a strange smile. Moreover, he even turned into a doppelganger and attacked Yu Qi from all directions. Although Yu Qi's cultivation was higher than the divine soul of Calamity, he was not very adapted to the divine soul of Calamity's special fighting style. Therefore, he had no means to deal with it in a short period of time. He could only passively defend, and naturally could not rush over to stop Meng Wuya's actions. Meng Wuya blushed and said in a low voice, "So what if it's destroyed? Your Majesty, you personally gave me this treasure before, but you didn't expect that I would use it on my own people, right? This is the cycle of nature. You planted the seeds yourself, and that's why today's results are the result. Who said that the heavens have no proof?" Suddenly he shouted, "Wind and thunder annihilation." Meng Wuya used all his strength to instill all his cultivation into it, and activated the wind and thunder annihilation for the second time. Since the first time he dealt with the divine soul of Calamity, the wind and thunder annihilation had exhausted all the accumulated energy. Meng Wuya knew that this item was the best weapon to deal with the divine soul of Calamity. If he wanted to destroy Chuyang, he must first deal with the divine soul of Calamity. Before he could confirm whether the divine soul of Calamity was finished, the wind and thunder annihilation must be maintained at its most powerful state. Therefore, during this period of time, he spared no expense in replenishing it. However, he didn't expect that he would use it in such a situation. At that moment, the destruction of wind and lightning was activated with the full power of a saint. Although the power could be unleashed, it was even more terrifying than when he was in the divine source realm. This was the masterpiece of the Black Cloud Heavenly Emperor Yuan Tianjia. At this moment, the power it displayed was really as if it could destroy the world. At the moment when he activated the wind and thunder annihilation, Meng Wuya suddenly turned around, and used all his remaining strength to wrap up all his surviving subordinates with his powerful cultivation, and threw them far away. "All of you get lost. If anyone comes back, don't blame me, Meng Wuya, for not recognizing him as a brother." At the same time, the other experts also realized the horror of this attack, and they all moved to stop and block it. Meng Wuya turned around at such a critical moment, and it was equivalent to exposing his back completely. He had no room to resist all the attacks. With a few cracking sounds, Meng Wuya didn't know how many bones in his body were broken at this moment. His entire back was already devoid of flesh and blood, and only his pale white bones could be seen. Furthermore, the bones were filled with sword and knife wounds, and bone fragments were flying everywhere. However, he still stood upright and actually endured this round of attacks and still sent all his subordinates away. "Not good. Retreat quickly. This bastard is crazy, he wants to perish together with us. Everyone leave quickly." The remaining 70+ people all shouted in panic, but it was already too late for them to leave. The wind and thunder annihilation was officially activated. Boom. The entire earth shook violently. The ground within a radius of 10,000 feet leaped up for 30 feet in an orderly manner, as if jumping high. Then it fell down again. Countless cracks appeared on the ground, gradually spreading out with a crackling sound. Puff, puff, puff. When the 70-something people under Wuxia faced this attack, all of them were sent flying without exception. 30-something people had their bodies pierced through by the white light in midair, and they were torn to shreds. They died and their Tao vanished. The reason why these people died the earliest was because their cultivation was relatively low, and they were all below the heavenly human level. As for the others, they all began to vomit blood one after another. Even the 4 saint-level experts couldn't help but spit out blood at this moment, and their chi and blood were in turmoil. There were also a few people who fell from empty gunny sack and they fell to the ground and no longer made a sound. It was just a wind and thunder annihilation, and under one attack 2/3 of the top experts under Moyen Tian Wuxia were killed. Now there were less than 30 people who were still standing. And these people were all seriously injured. Even if they still had battle power, it was also greatly reduced. Wuxia originally, with his saint-level cultivation, plus the other treasures bestowed upon him by Heavenly Emperor Ink Cloud, he had great confidence in stopping this catastrophe from happening. But he was entangled by the divine soul of the calamity. He could only watch helplessly as his subordinates turned into ashes one by one. He was so angry that the vital energy and blood in his chest surged, almost spitting out blood. Chu Yang. Wuxia roared angrily as he fought, "You despicable person, I gave you face but you don't want it. I gave you a fair chance, but you let the divine soul of the calamity trick me." Chapter 2169. Chu Yang coughed and said, "Deputy Commander Yu, you're wrong. That tribulation divine soul is a senior expert and not my subordinate. He has always dealt with whoever he doesn't like. It really has nothing to do with me. But generally speaking, as long as one's appearance isn't too bad and isn't too bad, he won't do anything to them. Deputy Commander Yu, you were attacked by the tribulation divine soul because your appearance is really a bit ugly. Although your appearance is given by your parents and it's not a problem, you still have the nerve to come out and show off when you're already like this. It seems that it's your fault, Deputy Commander Yu." The tribulation divine soul laughed strangely. "That Wuxia Chu Yang's words are really right. They've simply spoken to my heart. You said that you're not as good looking as Tan Tan, but you still have the nerve to come out and meet people. You said that who can give you face." The tribulation divine soul's words could be said to have a great origin. The tribulation divine soul could be considered a person who had seen a lot in his life. But among the ugliest people he had seen in this generation, Tan Tan was undoubtedly second to none. He was at the top of the list and no one could compete with him. Now, the divine soul of calamity had no choice but to bring out Tan Tan in order to highlight Yu Ye's ugly appearance. But, it truly felt that it had gone against its conscience when it said these words. So, even the speed of its attack had been somewhat slow. Tan Tan was healing his injuries. When he heard this, he immediately muttered with some dissatisfaction, "What do you mean by not as good looking as me? You bastard, do you know how to talk? How can that guy compare to this great master's little finger?" "No, it's my little toe." Chu Yang, Chu Lur and the others couldn't help but stifle their laughter. Wuxia was so angry that his liver hurt when he heard this. Although he still didn't know who Tan Tan was at this moment, but since the other party had brought it up like this, there was no doubt that it was an ugly person. However, although the attack of the divine soul of calamity was slightly slowed down due to its guilty conscience, it was still like a storm. In a short period of time, even if Yu Lai wanted to, he had no time to speak. He could only roar in anger. Just by looking at the situation, it was basically a tacit agreement. The greatest advantage of the divine soul of calamity was that it was not afraid of being hit. Swords, knives, fists and feet were completely immune to it. As for what it was most afraid of, or rather, the only thing it was afraid of, was soul attacks. But to be honest, there were not many people in the world who could cause damage to the divine soul of calamity. At this moment, it was as if Yu Lai was fighting against the air. Every punch and every kick was hitting cotton. That kind of feeling of being unable to exert strength made him feel extremely uncomfortable. Fortunately, his cultivation was a level higher than the tribulation spirit. Otherwise, he would have been killed by the tribulation spirit in just a few punches and kicks. Even so, victory was still within the grasp of the divine soul calamity. This was because the reign was still within the range of the divine soul calamity. It was just that this cycle was relatively long, perhaps 30 to 50 years, perhaps 300 to 500 years. Of course, in the short term, the tribulation spirit was still in the position of being beaten up. On the other side, after Meng Huiya's attack, the destruction of wind and thunder had carried too much energy and the load was too high. In the end, it shattered on the spot and turned into a pile of iron scraps. However, the strong backlash caused by the destruction of wind and thunder had severely shaken Meng Wuya's internal organs. Coupled with the previous wave of heavy attacks, although Meng Wuya could still stand, he couldn't move a single finger. Even his consciousness was gradually becoming blurry. The full strength of the 4 sages and the combined efforts of the 70 celestial beings to defend. If the destruction of wind and thunder was not in Meng Wuya's hands, there would be nothing left of Meng Wuya now. In the distance, hundreds of Dream Slayer army soldiers who were covered in cuts and bruises were desperately running back. They were crying and cursing as they ran. General, General Dream, we will live and die with the General. Kill this bunch of bastards. Nearby, the 4 Saint-level experts were the ones with the highest cultivation among the group. Although they were unavoidably injured by the previous attack, it wasn't too serious. At this moment, they were already able to stand up shakily. Dense white chi was emitting from their bodies. It was obvious that they were quickly recovering from their injuries. This was the terrifying thing about sages. They wouldn't be injured easily. Even if they were injured, they could quickly recover. This level of strength was not something that could be compared to those below the sage realm. Of the remaining 20 or so people who were lucky enough to survive, a few stood up. Most of them were sitting up. These people's conditions were very similar. They were all bleeding from their 7 orifices. Although it was very scary, in fact, their lives were not in danger. Although the destruction of wind and thunder was overbearing and powerful, its greatest use was still to attack the soul. Even if a sage realm expert used all his strength, it was impossible to kill so many high-level experts at once. Meng Wuya stubbornly stood upright, trying his best to maintain his consciousness that was about to dissipate. He clearly saw that his subordinates were desperately running back. He wanted to stop them, wanted to scold them, but before he could open his mouth to speak, mouthfuls of blood had already spilled out from his mouth. His eyes were filled with endless anxiety and helplessness. Brothers, I risked my life to launch this attack, hoping to cover your escape. Now that you've come back, aren't you seeking your own death? If that's the case, what's the point of my sacrifice? However, although he wanted to say these words, he no longer had the strength to say them. In the next moment, his upright body finally reached its limit, and he fell forward like a golden mountain toppling a jade pillar. Just before he fainted, he heard a weak voice saying fiercely, "There's a path to heaven, but you don't want to take it. There's no door to hell, but you barged in. You've come back just in time. Let's catch you all in one fell swoop." Meng Wuya panicked and suddenly lost all consciousness. The Dream Slayer army had already rushed back. When they saw Meng Wuya lying on the ground silently, there was almost no flesh on his back. All that was left were his bones. Immediately, everyone let out a furious roar. "General! General Meng! General, what's wrong with you? Revenge for the General?" These people had lived and eaten with Meng Wuya for tens of thousands of years. How deep was their relationship? Besides, Meng Wuya had never fought with anyone except when he gave orders. Everyone loved and respected him wholeheartedly. At this moment, when they saw Meng Wuya lying on the ground miserably, it was hard to look at whether he was dead or alive. Suddenly they all went crazy. However, even though these saints were all heavily injured, their cultivation was still there. Although these soldiers were considered experts in the martial world, they were still far from enough to deal with these relatively ordinary soldiers. Coincidentally, at this moment there seemed to be a change. Chu Yang said in a clear voice, "Yu Qi, Marshal Yu, I finished recuperating. Come, I'll have a fair fight with you." Yu Qi was so angry that he almost exploded. Previously, he did not deal with Chu Yang because he wanted to achieve his long-term political goals. He must first take down Meng Wuya and completely eliminate the internal trouble. Who would have thought that the divine soul of tribulation would suddenly intervene? He had already violated the agreement with him. Meng Wuya's desperate attack of wind and thunder annihilation was also something that he did not expect. Now, almost everyone on his side was injured and they were still fighting. At the critical moment when he was about to succeed, Chu Yang actually jumped out energetically and wanted to have a fair fight? Fair your ass. You're simply taking advantage of people's difficulties and hitting them when they're down. Do you have any shame? Do you still have any? Bai Yu Qin and the others also stood up like lively dragons and tigers as Chu Yang issued this order. They then flew towards the battlefield in a dignified manner. Therefore Tan Tan took the lead and shouted, "That you Xingjia. You mustn't believe the words of that old man, Tribulation Divine Soul. You should quickly come and take a look at this great Master Tan. You must know that this great Master Tan is much more handsome than you. The two of us aren't on the same level. There's no comparison between us. Comparing you with me is a kind of blasphemy. Yuchi looked over. He was really a little curious. How narcissistic was the other party that he could say such shameless words? But with one look he was so angry that he was about to go crazy. It turned out that this guy was that Tan. It turned out that he was the one who robbed with this demon. It was such an ugly ghost. Originally he thought that a person who could say such narcissistic words should have a good human appearance. At least he should be passable. But this guy was at most 30% human. The other 70% was simply an evil ghost. The divine soul of tribulation actually said that he was more handsome than him. Humans should at least have some self-awareness and a sense of shame. How could the two of them say such words? Don't you feel embarrassed? At this moment the Dream Slayer army only had 700 to 800 remaining soldiers. As for Yuan Tianji's side, because of a miscalculation just now, under Meng Wuya's wind and thunder annihilation, only 30 to 40 injured soldiers were left. As for the others, they had all become corpses. On Chu Yang's side, although they had a short rest, they had just gone through a big battle. So each of them was also injured. They were far from being in perfect condition. Naturally, they were not a fresh army. Now the three sides were in a state of being defeated, with a garden full of wounded soldiers. Now that they were confronting each other just from the visual effect, everyone was in a very sorry state, everyone was very sullen, and everyone was covered in wounds. In addition, everyone was filled with hatred. They stared at each other like fighting cocks. The Dream Slayer army was sullen and angry. They were loyal to the team they were fighting with, but they were labeled as traitors for no reason. They had a home but could not return. Bai Yu Chen and the others were sullen and angry. They were implicated for no reason. They had a home but could not return. As for Yu Qi's side, he was also sullen and angry. Originally, it was easy to capture the enemy, but suddenly his subordinates were heavily injured. Even so, the outcome of the battle was still the same. But at the last moment when the outcome was decided, a meddlesome person suddenly came out to meddle in other people's business. These few days my friends from the publishing house are here with me. I have to entertain them, so the updates are a little irregular. Please understand. It will be back to normal by the day after tomorrow. Then I will compensate them one by one. Please believe me. Chapter 2170. But in terms of overall strength, Yu Qi's side still had the upper hand, followed by Chu Yang's side. Meng Wuya's side had the most people, but was now the weakest side. Chu Yang waved his hand. Send someone to save General Meng first. I don't want him to die like this. Chu Lura looked around. It seemed that no one was willing to do this job, so she had to do it herself. She gently carried Meng Wuya's mangled body back. She didn't dare to use any strength. Based on Chu Lura's observation, this body seemed to have a subtle intuition that it would fall apart at any time. The saint on the opposite side was so angry that his nose was almost crooked. Chu Yang, do you still have a position? Meng Wuya chased you for 130,000 miles and killed so many of your people. Now that things have come to this, you still want to save him? Isn't this making your subordinates bitterly disappointed? This person was quite good at finding weaknesses. After seeing that Bai Yu Chen and the others didn't listen to Chu Yang's orders, he began to sow discord. Bai Yu Chen and the others showed undisguised mockery on their faces. The reason why they didn't move was definitely not because they were bitterly disappointed. Perhaps there was hatred. After all, so many of their comrades had died previously. But at this moment, Meng Wuya's experience was almost the same as theirs. They were all forced to the point of being homeless by one person in one order. They were in the same boat. At this moment, the only thing that Bai Yu Chen and the others felt was grief for the loss of their kind. From the experience of Meng Wuya and the others, they thought of their own experience and felt infinite sympathy from the bottom of their hearts. As for matters of life and death, everyone had their own positions. There would be hatred and they wouldn't even forget it. But when it came to enmity, it really couldn't be said to be. On the battlefield it was life and death. How could there be much reason to talk about? Chu Yang smiled faintly and said, "It seems that it's not your place to worry about how I do things. Who do you think you are? Do you think you have the right to criticize my decisions?" That person flew into a rage. Chu Yang, don't think that you have the upper hand. In my opinion, you're still far from being able to do that. You can't even withstand a single blow. Chu Yang squinted his eyes. Is that so? Why don't I have the self-awareness that you say? You're all talk and no action. Were you taught by your master's wife? Could it be the legendary invincible mouth cannon? Hearing Chu Yang's powerful and resonant words, all the saints on the other side were enraged. Anger rose from their hearts and their guts grew. Ignorant junior boasting shamelessly. In their eyes, even though Chu Yang had some luck, some tricks and some small tricks, but in the end he was still a nobody. Or rather he was still an ant. That was all. Yu Qi took a light breath. Chu Yang, this matter is our Mo Yun Tian's internal affairs, but it belongs to the category of private affairs. You are also a person of great status, why bother to intervene? Chu Yang smiled. Deputy Commander Yu thinks too highly of me. I didn't expect that I would actually become a person of great status in Deputy Commander Yu's eyes. I feel honored. Since Deputy Commander Yu has said so, logically and emotionally, I shouldn't intervene. Hearing this, Yu Qi was overjoyed. He secretly criticized Chu Yang in his heart. This Chu Yang is after all young and he settled it with just a few words. But he heard Chu Yang continue, it's just that if I really don't intervene, may I ask Deputy Commander, after this matter is settled, will you let me go? Yu Qi's smile instantly froze on his face and he was speechless. Let go. Logically and emotionally, no matter what, it was impossible to let Chu Yang go. Chu Yang was the biggest target of their long and arduous journey. How could they let him go? Yu Qi was silent for a while, then he said, Chu Yang, our Mo Yun Tian's previous enmity with you is a huge enmity of life and death. But now, it's time for us Mo Yun Tian to quell the internal strife. The martial world has its own rules and the imperial court has its own laws. Please step aside for the time being. This marshal is deeply grateful for your kind intentions. Chu Yang sneered, Deputy Commander, you are really eloquent. You are indeed the superior of that person who is invincible in talking. You are much better than him. You want to dismiss me with just a few words of courtesy? Deputy Commander, are you too confident in your talking skills, or do you think that I am young and ignorant and can be easily bullied? His smile was even colder. Since we are already destined to have an irreconcilable enmity, why would I care about your internal strife? The more internal strife you have, the more advantageous it is for me. Since you have internal strife, good, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for me. Why should I step aside? Are you grateful for my kindness? I can't afford such kindness. If I give it, no one will be grateful and I will be laughed at as an idiot. Yu Qi frowned and his expression became colder. At this moment he understood that Chu Yang was determined to intervene in this matter. Let's take a step back. Although Meng Wuya had been chasing me all this while, I have always admired resolute men. Chu Yang raised his head proudly. If Meng Wuya was killed by me when he was chasing after me, then he deserved to die. However, I can't bear to see such a heroic figure being wronged by you all. Chu Yang turned his head and looked at Meng Wuya, who was badly mutilated. His eyes were full of pride. Meng Wuya and I also have an irreconcilable blood feud. However, I would rather that General Meng died in my hands or, on the battlefield against the heavenly demons than die here. Die in the most despicable political struggle, and become a sacrificial pawn. Chu Yang's words were powerful and resonating. Some of the 800 Dream Slayer army soldiers who had survived began to sob softly. Chu Yang's words were extremely honest and sincere. He was definitely not trying to win people's hearts. However, it was precisely because of this that these hot-blooded men were truly moved. They might have their own creed in life, and wouldn't be recruited by Chu Yang. But they didn't want their brothers, the people they respected, to be sacrificed like this. They didn't want to die in such a humiliating way. Moreover, they would be branded with a traitorous mark that could never be washed away because of framing. Yu Qi turned his head to look at the people on his side, and then looked at Chu Yang's side. He quickly weighed the pros and cons in his heart and came to a conclusion. In terms of high-end strength, including himself, he had a total of 5 sages on his side. He had even reached the sage level. The other side had the divine soul of a calamity, 2 sages of the demon royal family, and Chu Yang's strength was unfathomable. He seemed to be at the peak of the celestial being level, but his strength was definitely not to be underestimated. He might not be weaker than a sage. As for the rest, although their strength was not bad, they did not have the ability to affect the final outcome of the battle. Purely based on this analysis, his side still had a slight advantage, but only a slight advantage. It was hard to say that they would definitely win. If a battle really broke out now, then the most optimistic result would be victory. However, the people on his side, including himself, might not be more than 3 people who could survive. If they were defeated, at most he would be the only one who could escape. The others would definitely die here. Such a result, no matter which one it was, even if it was the best and most optimistic result, even if Chu Yang and Meng Wuya's people were all killed for Yu Qi, the loss would not be worth the gain. because those who were still standing in Yu Qi's camp were the absolute backbone of his forces, and they were also loyal to him. If these people died, the blow to Yu Qi's forces would definitely be more serious than the blow of Mu Shuai losing Meng Wuya. Even Chu Yang and Meng Wuya would die in this battle. Yu Qi now felt that he could not afford to lose so many people. However, Chu Yang had already steeled his heart to interfere in this matter. This was a bit difficult to deal with, and he was in a dilemma. Tomorrow afternoon, after sending my friend back, I will start working overtime to pay off the debt. The day after tomorrow, I will try to pay off the debt in 1 or 2 days. Today is Yu Luoying Dai's birthday. Let us wish her a happy birthday and wish her a happy birthday. Well, don't worry, the book's little butterfly is about to be born. I saw a post from the deputy moderator and was very moved. I just want to say, with you guys I will not fall. I will always be with you until you are tired of me. I have a lot of stories to write for you guys. I hope that all of you will laugh and be happy. If this happiness is brought to you by me, then it will be the glory of my life. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.